Chapter 685. Zhong Tai's side lost one of their disciples as soon as they arrived, causing the audience to gasp. However, the cultivators in the sect acted as if nothing had happened. They whispered to each other and pointed at each other, discussing the person just now. Elder Bai looked at the direction Lan Jianguang left, and after thinking for a while, he made a judgment. That spirit dragon was raised by Fu Yang sect's snake-eyed demonic Taoist. It was originally taken by Fengxiang Sword School. How did it end up in Xian Yu sect's hands? Elder Lin said scornfully, Xian Yu sect's words sound nice, saying that they won't associate with the heretical sections a few days ago. They even mocked my Zhong Tai as a place that hides filth. But in private, who knows how many shady deals they have. Bai Chang Daoren said, the spirit dragon scales are tough, and only powerful talismans can harm it. It's also born with a pair of red eyes that can confuse the mind. Luckily, it flies slowly, so if we meet this person again, it won't be hard to avoid it. I'm just afraid that this person has more tricks up his sleeves. Yen Chang Daoren said, don't worry, my two juniors. That person's cultivation isn't high, so he might not be able to make the spirit dragon listen to him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a hurry to return. Elder Bai said with realization, that's right. Senior brother's words hit the nail on the head. If that's the case, there's no need to be afraid. At this moment, a flying boat came from the opposite side. A Taoist child was riding on it, and he held a sword in his arms. There was a picture of a mountain on the sword hilt, which was the token of Xian Yu sect's sect leader. When he got close, he raised the sword above his head and said with a clear child's voice, Sect leader Yang ordered me to send a message, asking your sect to give up the mountain and find another place to stay. When the cultivators of Zhong Tai heard this, their expressions turned ugly. The place they were at was wide and flat, with a mountain behind them and a river in front of them. It was a great location, and just now, there were dozens of altars. Although it wasn't difficult to build another altar, it was embarrassing to be forced to leave as soon as they gained a foothold. Sect leader Qiao, however, didn't show any displeasure. He waved his hand, and a young man beside him stood up and said, Please reply to your sect leader, we will do as we promised. The Taoist boy bowed and shook the talisman. He turned around and went back. Elder Yen pondered for a moment, then flew up from the altar and stopped in front of sect leader Qiao's carriage. He bowed and took the initiative to apologize. This old man's arrangement for this formation was improper. Please punish me, sect leader. Sect leader Qiao consoled him instead, saying, Since it's a duel, it's inevitable that there will be winners and losers. This is a common occurrence. Elder Yen, don't blame yourself. You'll just have to get your revenge next time. Seeing that sect leader Qiao had easily let go of the matter, Elder Yen also put on a grateful expression at the right time. He bowed and said, Thank you for your forgiveness, sect leader. I wonder where the disciples should go? Sect leader Qiao stroked his beard and looked. After a short while, he pointed to a mountaintop in the northwest and said, I think that place is suitable for us to stand. Elder Yen turned around to look at Zhang Xian. He also agreed and said, This old man will go arrange it right away. After bowing respectfully once more, he returned to the altar. Elder Lin hurriedly came over and asked, Senior brother, did the sect leader make things difficult for you? Elder Yen said in a natural tone. He said, Don't worry, it's just a loss of an outsider. How could the sect leader blame him? He's just putting on an act for others to see. After he said that, he waved his hand and found a disciple. He instructed, Send a peaceful longevity pill to every spell altar. As for the deceased Tao friend, send 3 bushels of Big Dipper heroes and a ship of cinnabar to comfort his heart. After that disciple left, Bai Chang Daoren said, I'll go arrange for the altar to be moved. Yen Chang Daoren said, Thank you, junior brother. After the arrangements were made, the Zhong Tai cultivators could only move their carriages forward. Originally, it attracted a lot of complaints, but once the peaceful longevity pill was in their hands, they all quieted down. On the mountaintop in the northwest direction, they once again set up the altar. After being busy for an hour, it was finally settled. At this time, everyone looked at Elder Yen. Just now, it was Xian Yu who came out to challenge him. According to the previous duels, this time, It should be Zhong Tai's side who sent out their people first. Elder Yen stroked his beard. Just now, Xian Yu had won a battle, so this battle against Zhong Tai was especially important. They had to win for sure. However, if they immediately sent out their sex heroes, it would seem like they didn't have enough confidence. This person's status couldn't be too high, but his strength couldn't be too weak. There weren't many suitable people here. He didn't think for long before he came up with a plan. He turned to the person beside him and said, "Go and ask the young sect leader if there's anyone suitable. If there isn't, I'll find someone else." Elder Lin and Elder Bai exchanged glances. With Du Shixuan's temper, as long as he asked, there was no way he wouldn't agree. However, this person wasn't at the stage to go into battle yet, and he didn't have many capable people around him. If he lost, not only would his strength be exhausted, he would also lose face. If he won, it would be Elder Yan's strategy, and he would also be able to answer to sect leader Qiao. The two altars were only a few miles apart. The disciple quickly rushed to Du Shixuan's location and reported Elder Yan's words word for word. Du Shixuan laughed coldly and said, "Go back and tell Elder Yan that I'll take on this formation." Then he looked down at Zhang Yan. However, before he could say anything, Xing Fulia stepped forward and said, "Young sect leader, I'm willing to go." At the same time, he tilted his head and said to Zhang Yan, "Jinren Zhang's transcendence energy is profound. It's better if you leave this formation to me." As he spoke, he kept cupping his hands at him. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Since fellow Taoist Xing is willing, I will sit on the altar and wait for good news." Du Shixuan frowned. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Elder Yan asking him to make arrangements. Although there were only Zhang Yan and Xing Fulia by his side, Zhang Yan was a second-layer Yuanine cultivator, and his transcendence energy was far superior to a first-layer cultivator. Moreover, he was invited from outside the sect, so it was appropriate for him to go. However, Xing Fulia took the initiative to ask for help, so he couldn't disappoint him. However, he was also afraid that Xing Fulia would lose, so he took out an item from his sleeve and tossed it over. He said, "Take this treasure to protect yourself." When Xing Fulia caught it and circulated his spiritual energy, he knew that this treasure wasn't simple. He was overjoyed, bowed, and went up to the sky. He wasn't being impulsive, but he knew very well that it wasn't enough to just rely on flattery to stay under Du Shixuan's command. He might be able to get some small benefits, but if he wanted to be truly valued, he still had to show his own ability. Right now, both sides were just testing each other, and the battle wasn't intense yet. It seemed like the time for those with powerful combat abilities to go on the battlefield was still far away. If he fought now, he might have some chance of winning, but if he waited any longer, he would be seeking death. After he stood on the cloud, he said loudly that Lan Jianguang is just now using sorcery to hurt people. It's not really a skill. I, Xing Fuliu, am here to ask for advice. May I ask Xian Yu cult, is there anyone willing to accept my challenge? After a while, someone also came out from the other side. As he expected, it wasn't a disciple of Xian Yu cult, but a cultivator in a blue robe with wide sleeves. He had thin eyebrows and fair skin, and a well-proportioned figure. He looked very delicate, and there was a sword with a phoenix head hanging on his waist. Judging from his robe alone, he wasn't from Xian Yu cult. Xing Fuliu's eyes were sharp, and he saw that the sword had a unique shape. The other party seemed to have some connection with Fengxiang Sword School, and he couldn't help but mutter to himself. His mind raced and he suddenly had an idea. He took out the magic treasure that Du Shixuan gave him and flashed it in his hand so that the other party could see it clearly. Then he transmitted his voice and said, "Fellow Taoist, our cultivation levels are similar. If we have to fight, the one who wins will either die or be injured. Why don't we use another method?" After the blue-robed cultivator saw the Dharma treasure, he couldn't help but frown, and also transmitted his voice. "What do you want?" Xing Fulia took out another pouch and said, "As long as fellow Taoist can take this Dharma treasure of mine, I will immediately admit defeat. I won't go back on my word." If the two sides weren't enemies, and they didn't want to fight to the death, this kind of battle was very common between cultivators. The blue-robed cultivator thought about it, and he felt that in front of the cultivators of the two sects, even if he didn't make a vow, he wasn't afraid of Xing Fuliu going back on his word. He also had a supreme treasure to protect himself, so he replied generously, "Fine, as you say." Xing Fuliu was secretly delighted, but he didn't show it on his face. He said, "Fellow Taoist, take it." He shook the pouch so that the mouth of the pouch was facing outwards. He raised his hand and caressed the pouch. The inside of the pouch instantly swelled up as if it was full of air. There was another ripple, and a ball of black wind evil chi was spat out. The blue-robed cultivator was on guard. He was also afraid that the other party would play tricks. If he felt that something was wrong, he would take the initiative to escape even if he had to admit defeat. However, when he saw that the black wind was powerful, it wouldn't be difficult for him to block it with his treasure. He couldn't help but make up his mind, and with a shake of his wrist, he took out a copper plate. The plate flipped in the air, and it reflected an auspicious light that covered his body. The black wind came over, whistling in the distance, but when it got close, it suddenly separated, like a ghost's hand or a devil's claw. It coiled around him like a whip, and it kept tightening. It gathered more and more, as if it was endless. However, the auspicious light did not diminish at all, and it was still bright like a star. When the blue-robed cultivator saw Xing Fuliu's method, he was relieved, and let him do as he pleased. Xing Fuliu looked carefully, and he made a judgment in his heart. Although this person dealt with it well, he didn't look like someone who was experienced in battle. He smiled slyly and thought to himself, Dao Xing's luck isn't bad. He patted the pouch, and suddenly a black bird flew out. After it came out, it chirped twice at the other side, and then turned back. When the blue-robed cultivator heard the birds chirping, for some reason, his spiritual vigor was in a mess, as if he was about to fall from the sky. He was shocked, and he quickly tried to stabilize his body. Xing Fuliu was already waiting there, so how could he miss this opportunity? He activated his mana, and the boundless black wind squeezed toward the center, and in an instant, it crushed the auspicious light that no one was controlling. The blue-robed cultivator cried out in pain, and suddenly his body turned into a swift sword ray, and in the blink of an eye, he tore the black wind apart, and went into the Xianyu formation. Xing Fuliu was stunned, and a trace of lingering fear arose in his heart. If this person didn't escape just now, and instead attacked him with a sword, he might not be able to block it. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, and imitated what just now Lan Jingguang did, and bowed to Yang Shuyong. He didn't dare to stay any longer, and hurriedly returned to the spell altar. After he landed, he let out a breath, and bowed to Du Shixuan, and said with a smile, "Young sect master, fortunately I didn't disappoint you." Chapter 686. Zhong Tai's side won a round and regained quite a bit of face. Sect Master Qiao's expression also relaxed slightly. He asked, "Who invited that fellow Taoist just now?" This was a question he already knew the answer to. How could the disciples not know what he was thinking? They answered, reporting to sect leader, that spiritual master Xing was recruited by young sect leader. Madame Zhao said happily, "So it was Sun Er who invited him. Husband, you have to reward him." Sect leader Qiao nodded, "I didn't expect my son to have such foresight. Come, pass my order and give him my spring water ruler." How could anyone with a discerning eye not see that sect leader Qiao was deliberately trying to share some of the benefits with his son? But a victory was a victory, after all. Even though some of the elders were dissatisfied, they didn't step forward to stop him. At this moment, a disciple went up the spell altar and bowed. "Sect leader, Elder Yen sent someone to ask which mountain peak he wants." Sect leader Qiao thought carefully and pointed outside. "Send someone to pass the message. He wants the land under Xianyu sect." The disciple acknowledged the order loudly. Just now, Xianyu forced them to move their mountain peak. They were filled with anger, and now was the time to take revenge. This news quickly spread to the Xianyu cult, but cult master Yang Shuyong was not surprised at all. He had an expression as if he had known this would happen. He said, "We have disgraced Zhong Tai. As expected, they want to get revenge." Elder Jin Ling flattered, "But this is within sect leader's spiritual master's calculations." However, Yang Shuyong repeatedly waved his hand. Although he appeared to be disdainful towards Zhong Tai on the surface, in reality, he did not truly underestimate his opponent. He said, "It's not that simple. The place we're standing on is the highest terrain in this mountain range. It can be said that all the other mountains are small in comparison. How could Zhong Tai allow us to occupy this place for long? He will definitely try to take it away." Xian Yu was prepared. There was no spell altar in the mountain, so it only took a short while. They moved to a different mountain peak. Just now that everything was settled, Yang Shuyong couldn't wait and ordered someone to challenge him. Immediately, a cultivator leaped into the air. Zhong Tai also sent someone up. However, the two of them were not disciples of the two sections. They knew that even if they expended a lot of effort to kill their opponents, the benefits they would obtain would be very little. Thus, they had a tacit understanding and dealt with each other a few times. Thus, they separated. It could be said that they were evenly matched. Yang Shuyong was displeased and sneered, "These outsiders are indeed unreliable." He turned around to look at Elder Jin Ling and said, "Guardian Jin Ling, who do you think you should send out for the next match?" How could Elder Jin Ling not know what he meant? He bowed and said, "Daoren is willing to come with us." Yang Xiong said, "All right. Jin Ling, how about you bring back 3 heads this time?" Although it was a question, his tone was unyielding. There was no room for negotiation. The corners of the Golden Spirit Elder's eyes twitched slightly. Yang Shuyong's reputation in the sect was so great that he didn't dare to say anything. He said, "Daoren does not dare to disgrace the cult's prestige. I will do my best." On the other side of the stage, Elder Yen asked, "Who should go up?" Elder Lin flipped the book in his hand and pointed at a name. This person is called Shinshogu. He is a tactful person and has a good reputation among the cultivators. In my opinion, why don't we send him up this time? Elder Yen Daoren said, "Junior brother, just arrange it." Elder Lin signaled to the boy beside him, "Go and pass the order." At this moment, Shinshogu was chatting with a few people he was close to. After receiving the order from the boy, he didn't waste any time and flew up into the sky. He reported his name and waited patiently for his opponent. Not long later, he saw a streak of light slowly flying over. At first, he didn't pay much attention to it. However, when he saw who it was, his body shook and he cried out, "Elder Jin Ling?" Seeing that it was this person who came up, Elder Yen frowned and his gaze sharpened. Elder Lin, on the other hand, couldn't keep his cool and stood up in shock. "Why is it Elder Jin Ling, this Daoren?" Elder Bai shook his head. The Golden Spirit Elder was the great protector when he was the previous headmaster of Xianyu sect. Although he was not the most powerful in the Xianyu sect, he could be ranked in the top 3 in terms of fighting abilities. This Shinshogu was most likely going to lose. At this moment, Shinshogu was panicking. This person was a second Yuanine cultivator. Not only was his cultivation higher than Shinshogu's, his cultivation technique was also Xianyu's, and he didn't lack any treasures. He was better than Shinshogu in every aspect. He wanted to admit defeat, but he couldn't back down because of the previous contract. He could only bite the bullet and go forward. Shinshogu greets Elder Jin Ling. Elder Jin Ling nodded and politely returned the greeting. "Fellow Taoist Chen, it has been more than 60 years since we parted at Radiant Pavilion. However, now that we have a different master, we can't care about our past friendship." Chen Shogu smiled bitterly. "This lowly Taoist has no choice. I can only learn from Elder's brilliance." After exchanging pleasantries, the two of them separated. Elder Jin Ling took out a golden hoop from his sleeve and threw it into the air. He made a hand sign and the hoop suddenly turned into hundreds of them. They all danced in the air, vibrating and whistling. They then turned down and smashed towards Shinshogu's head. Shinshogu was afraid of this Doran's name, so he was afraid before the battle even started. When he saw that Daoren used his famous treasure, the phantom hoop, he immediately dodged. He wasn't in the mood to fight with this person, so he planned to hold on for an hour before being defeated. His opponent's cultivation was much higher than his, so if he could hold on for that long, no one could say that he wasn't capable. He originally hoped that he could hold on for as long as he could, but the golden hoop seemed to have a mind of its own. It actually split up and chased after him, and more of them appeared. In just a moment, there were tens of thousands of them. In all directions, the sky and the earth were filled with the traces of these golden hoop. Although Chinshogu knew that some of it was true, he originally hoped that he could hold on for as long as he could, but he didn't expect that his opponent's methods were even more powerful than the rumors said. If this continued, in less than a moment, he would have nowhere to run. He racked his brains for a countermeasure, but even after coming up with a few ideas, they were all rejected. Looking at Elder Jean Ling's murderous appearance, it seemed that if he could take his life, he wouldn't hold back. Thinking of this, anger rose in his heart. He took out a purple bead from his sleeve and held it tightly in his palm. This object was called the purple halo bead. In the past, he inadvertently obtained a half-inch long purple thunderwood. It took him dozens of years and a few of his best friends to refine it. Because it wasn't easy to obtain this thunder bead, there were only 7 of them, so he regarded it as a life-saving treasure. Ever since he refined it, he had never used it. However, although this object was powerful, if the opponent was too far away when he used it, there would be enough time for him to dodge. There would also be enough time to dodge, so it was best to use it in close proximity. After Chinshogu made up his mind, he set up a few traps and showed off his flaws in an attempt to trick Elder Jean Ling to come forward. However, this Daoran was unusually shrewd and ruthless. He didn't care about Chinshogu's attempts at baiting the enemy. Instead, he was almost caught up by the golden hoop a few times. Chinshogu's successive schemes were to no avail. He couldn't help but feel dispirited. At this moment, he didn't have enough strength, so his escape light couldn't help but slow down. However, this moment of carelessness gave Elder Jean Ling an opportunity. His eyes shone brightly and he suddenly shouted. Thousands of golden hoops suddenly rushed forward. In an instant, it was like rain, continuously smashing onto his protective treasure light. Although some of it was true, after a few hits, Chinshogu couldn't take it anymore. However, he was also angry. He secretly clenched his teeth and said, "Do you think I'm afraid of you? Since you're bullying me like this, don't blame me for fighting you to the death." He took out a blood-red pill and stuffed it into his mouth, hurriedly chewing it a few times. After swallowing it, thousands of spiritual lights appeared around his body, merging with the protective treasure light. His entire body seemed to have shrunk into a ball of thick fat. His figure gradually faded away, and anyone who looked at him would be able to see him. Anyone who looked at it would be blurry. When Elderbai saw this, he shook his head and said, "The 3 evil sects are really poisonous. I didn't think that there would still be so many of such evil things." In the past, although the 3 evil sects were wiped out one by one, the celestial cities around couldn't be taken down in a short period of time. As such, many of the items that the evil sects refined were spread out. Some of the items that the large sects didn't want were taken by the small sections. Just now, Chinshogu was using the protective treasure that Fu Yang sect refined. Elder Jean Ling's brows rose up. He also recognized the origin of this pill, but he revealed a sneer. This treasure pill was indeed not easy to break through, but the person who used it would find it hard to fly. He had many ways to deal with it. He casually summoned the golden rings from all around and with a point of his finger, he actually put them on Chinshogu's protective treasure light. If the treasure light resisted, he would slowly retreat. However, if he sensed that the treasure light was retreating, he would tighten his strength. After going back and forth for a while, Chinshogu felt that he had used up a lot of his magic power and felt tired. However, he still gritted his teeth and held on. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Elder Jean Ling. He held the lightning bead in his hand and waited for the moment that Elder Jean Ling let down his guard. After another moment, the treasure light around him couldn't take it anymore and gradually faded. He knew that if he didn't act now, he wouldn't have another chance. He suddenly threw out the 7 lightning beads. However, even at this moment, Elder Jean Ling still didn't lose his caution. Seeing that something was flying at him, he didn't try to block it. He waved his sleeve and instantly escaped into the distance with a gust of astral wind. When the lightning bead landed on empty air, it immediately exploded. Fire and lightning shot out. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Even the nearby mountains collapsed, causing the people below to cry out in surprise. Elder Jinling's expression also changed slightly. He didn't think that his opponent had hidden such a powerful lightning bead. Just now, if he was careless, he might be defeated. Qin Shogu saw that he didn't injure the person at all and was disappointed. Taking advantage of the fact that the person had escaped far away and was unable to control the golden rings, Qin Shogu forced out all of his Fa Li and pushed it back a little. Then he used the astral wind to escape. But he hadn't gone far when the golden hoop suddenly spun in the air. In the distance, Qin Shogu had actually traversed 1,000 feet in an instant and was closing in. The golden hoop spun again and traversed another 1,000 feet. After 3 consecutive spins, it had already caught up to him. Then he made a hand sign and all the golden rings flew up together, trapping Qin Shogu once again. Qin Shogu was like a turtle in a jar at this moment and had no strength to resist anymore. He begged for mercy, "Elder Jinling, please spare my life." Elder Jinling's expression was cold and he didn't care at all. He activated his Fa Li and the golden rings instantly closed. Qin Shogu screamed and was instantly minced into countless pieces of meat. Even so, Elder Jinling wasn't willing to let him go. He waved his hand and a bolt of astral lightning destroyed the escaping origin spirit. There was no joy or sorrow on his face, as if he had done something normal. He looked down and said coldly, "Who wants to fight again? P.S. Just now the battery tripped. I haven't used it for a long time, so I couldn't find it. When I opened it, I found that a lot of it was missing, so I had to recode it." Chapter 687. Just now, when Elder Jinling showed up, the elders from Zhongtai knew that Qin Shogu was no match for him. Elder Bai said in a deep voice, "Jinling has mastered the art of teleportation. Even though he used a Dharma artifact to cultivate the illusion necklace to this level, there are very few people in the same generation who can do it. It's a pity that perfected cultivator Qin died." He felt pity for Qin Shogu. Qin Shogu knew how to read people's expressions and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Among the cultivators he recruited, Qin Shogu's cultivation was not bad. Initially, he wanted to make Qin Shogu his confidant. As long as he won a battle, he could arrange for Qin Shogu to manage an immortal city. However, Qin Shogu's luck was bad and he met Elder Jinling. He gave it another thought. Everyone knew that Qin Shogu was close to him, so he had to express his gratitude. So he stood up and took the initiative to request for battle. "Senior brother, not to mention this old Taoist Tao art is profound, he's extremely shrewd and isn't someone an ordinary person can deal with. I'm willing to go up for a while." Elder Yen thought for a while and said, "There is no rush. I have other plans. Send another person to fight him. His cultivation should not be too high." Elder Bai was startled. Elder Jinling was a level 2 cultivator. Wasn't sending someone to fight him on purpose? However, he trusted Elder Yen and did not ask for the reason. He only hesitated and asked, "Senior martial brother, if we lose another battle, the sect master?" Elder Yen tilted his head and looked at him. "As long as the person who loses is not from Zhongtai sect, the sect master will not say anything. Go make the arrangements. I will tell you in detail when you come back." Elder Bai could only keep his questions to himself and went to make the arrangements. Not long after, 2 rays of light flew up from the altar and went to meet them. After a while, Elder Bai returned to the altar and explained, "Those are the 2 brothers, Qi Gu and Qi Liang. They are Damo Immortal City's Lord Hong Ying's disciples. Just now, these 2 came up to fight me. I thought it was not against Senior Martial Brother's instructions, so I went with the flow." Yen Changfeng Daoren, "You did very well, these 2 are very suitable." Seeing that Elder Bai still didn't understand this arrangement, he said, "You don't have to be confused. I just want to see what Xian Yu's intention is in drawing the mountain as a boundary. After these few matches, we'll be able to see the answer. Victory or defeat is secondary." Only then did Elder Bai come to a realization. He said in admiration, "Senior brother is really thoughtful. I am far inferior to you." Meanwhile, within the Paleo flying carriage, Madame Zhao looked at the Qi brothers and frowned. "Why are these 2 here?" Sect leader Qiao asked in surprise, "Does Madame recognize him?" Madame Zhao said, "These two were originally disciples of the Fengxiang Sword School, but later on they violated the school's rules. Because of our past friendship, we didn't take their lives. After chasing the magic sword back, I chased it out. I originally thought that it was hiding in another continent. Who would have thought that it came to me, Zhongtai?" Sect leader Qiao said, "Since they are expelled, they are no longer disciples of the Phoenix clan. I can even tolerate people from the heretical sections. Not to mention these two." The Qi brothers went up to the clouds. The big brother Qigu walked up and bowed, saying, "Guardian Jinling, both of us will fight you in this formation. If you think it's fair, you can find another person. We will wait here." The two of them weren't twins. There was a difference of 10 years. Qigu was middle-aged. His face was square and steady. Qi Liang, on the other hand, was different. His eyes were spirited and his face was sharp. When the former spoke, he didn't say a word. He just stared at Elder Jinling without blinking. Elder Jinling glanced over and saw that the two brothers each had a magic sword with beads hanging from their waists. He had a rough idea of what was going on, so he lowered his eyes and said, "There's no need. You two can start now." The Qi brothers didn't stand on ceremony. They shouted and immediately split up. One on the left and one on the right, they formed a pincer. Almost at the same time, they made hand signs. With two clangs, two rays of light flew out of their scabbards and slashed towards Elder Jinling. They wanted to kill him right from the start. Elder Jinling looked calm and relaxed, but deep in his heart, he didn't dare to be careless at all. This time, he didn't take out the golden ring. Instead, he grabbed it with both hands and shook it. Countless rays of golden light appeared and covered the sky. It was so bright that people couldn't open their eyes. When the people from the two sects saw this, they felt that it was dazzling. They had no choice but to use hand signs to protect their eyes. But even so, it was still difficult to see the situation in the sky clearly. The Qi brothers were originally very confident. In a battle between cultivators, unless there was a huge difference in their battle strength, it would be easy for others to find their flaws if their Dao techniques and divine arts were known. Therefore, cultivators usually wouldn't easily reveal their strength in front of others. On the other hand, the Golden Spirit Elder and Qin Shogu had revealed many techniques when they were fighting. The two of them had already discussed a strategy to deal with their enemy. However, when they were illuminated by this sudden light, they were stunned for a moment. When the two swords descended, they slashed empty air, causing them to curse in their hearts. If they were still holding the magic sword that they had refined their whole life, even if they didn't deliberately control it, they could kill the enemy with just a thought. But when they were chased out of the sect, the sword was taken by Fengxiang Sword School. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to care about this mere ray of light. At this moment, when they were about to take it back, they felt a suction force from below, as if the magic sword was stuck to it. They immediately panicked and used hand signs to summon it back. But after a moment of stalemate, they felt that their hearts were empty. They actually lost contact with their minds. They were shocked and knew that it was not good. The two of them looked at each other and fled in different directions. At this moment, a golden ring suddenly flew out from the light and went straight for Qigu. At the same time, Elder Jinling appeared from the ring. In a few breaths, he caught up to him. Qigu had no choice but to turn around to face the enemy. But after losing the magic sword, his battle strength was greatly reduced. He barely managed to block a few rounds before he lost his order. He was hit in the chest by the ring. In an instant, his bones were fractured and he fell from the sky. When Elder Jinling wanted to turn around to look for Qi Liang, the latter had already flown into the Jinzhong sect's formation. He couldn't catch up in time and could only give up. Elder Yen saw that Qi Liang was coming over, and his eyes revealed some coldness. He said, "Running away from battle, how can we let you off so easily?" Elder Lin immediately understood. He took out the indenture from his bosom and shone it in the air. Qi Liang immediately obeyed the oath. His entire body went limp and he fell from the sky. His head hit the altar. Because his mana was restricted by the indenture, he actually fell to his death. Seeing this scene, many cultivators felt a chill in their hearts. Old Man Jinling was also startled, but he had already defeated 3 people in a row, so he felt that he should be able to answer to Yang Shuyong. He waved his hand and threw out 3 talismans, which went towards the 3 mountains. He cupped his hands towards the flying carriage and said, "Sect Master Qiao. The place where the talisman falls is where I, Xian Yu, will go. I will take my leave now." After saying that, he waved his sleeve and flew away. He went all the way back to the Xian Yu formation. When he reached the foot of the mountain, a Taoist boy came down and stopped him. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Why didn't you let me go up?" The Taoist boy said, "Sect leader said that Guardian Jin Ling was supposed to bring back 3 heads. However, I only managed to kill 2 people. Protector, please go back and fight again. I wish for a perfect ending." Elder Jin Ling was furious. But he couldn't go against the sect leader, so he had no choice but to go back. Ever since the 3 talisman floated away, Elder Yen had been watching attentively, waiting for them to land. He slowly stood up from his seat and went to the edge of the altar. His eyes were filled with a strange light as he said, "The mountains as chess pieces. In your dreams." On the other altar, Zhang Yen saw this scene. He couldn't help but nod and said, "Indeed." Xing Fuliu heard his words and also came over to take a look. But after looking for a long time, he didn't find anything, so he cupped his hands and asked, "Taoist Zhang, what did you see? Can you tell me?" Zhang Yen laughed and said, "Why not? Speaking of which, it has something to do with you and me." He pointed and said, "Come to think of it, it's nothing special. There are 6 tall hills outside where we're staying, and they're all connected to each other. As long as we occupy these 6 hills, it's the same as trapping us within. Xian Yu occupied 1 earlier, and now 4 more have fallen into his hands. Now, we're only missing 2 more, and we'll be able to close our doors." Xing Fuliu originally thought that he had some brilliant insight, but after hearing those words, he didn't think much of it. He said, "We are cultivators of the profound, we can fly through the sky and burrow through the earth. If we want to leave, do you really think these few hills can stop us?" Zhang Yen said, "If not, according to the rules of the battle, the disciples of Zhong Tai cannot fly into the places that Xian Yu occupies. Are you thinking of giving up? Also, if Xian Yu occupies these 6 hills and sets up an altar and formation, he will be in an invincible position. Even if he loses, there is nothing to fear. When the time comes, he will block the way out and no one will be able to get out." Xing Fuliu wasn't stupid and immediately thought of this key point. His face couldn't help but turn pale. At the side, Du Shixuan's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He stood up and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang's words are reasonable. We have to guard against this matter. I'll go talk to Father." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rumble on the spell altar and he flew away. Xing Fuliu didn't say what he thought. Taoist Zhang saw through the plan, it must be a great merit. Zhang Yen smiled and said, "Xian Yu's intention is clear when he occupies these 3 hills. Anyone with eyes can see it. Sect leader Qiao, as the leader of a sect, why do you need I to remind you?" Sure enough, it didn't take long for Du Shixuan to turn around. His expression looked much more relaxed as he said, "So Father was already prepared. I was worried for nothing." He then looked at Zhang Yen and cupped his hands, saying, "However, I still have to thank Master Zhang for your kind reminder." Zhang Yen returned the courtesy. "Don't mention it. I was just talking nonsense. Don't take it seriously." While the two were talking, a golden light suddenly appeared in the sky. Xian Yu sent someone to challenge him again. Du Shixuan looked up and saw that it was Elder Jin Ling who came back. He immediately said angrily, "Why is this old man here again? Is he trying to bully my Zhong Tai?" He waved his hand at a disciple beside him and said, "Go to the sect leader and tell him that I want to go into battle." Seeing that Du Shixuan was in a hurry, the disciple didn't even care about etiquette and flew away. But after he left, he didn't come back. Du Shixuan was quite impatient. He wanted to ignore the order and kill this person first. But just as he moved, he saw a ray of light coming from afar and landed in front of him. It was a servant girl in a yellow dress. She curtsied and said, "Young master, Madam has said that Rong Juanzhong is the real enemy of our sect. Before this person shows himself, It's better for you to be patient, lest others find out about us. Du Shushuan said impatiently, Who are you? I don't know you. Get lost, otherwise don't blame me for being merciless. The servant girl didn't panic. She showed something in her hand and said, Madam's golden hairpin is here. Young sect leader, do you recognize it? Du Shushuan's expression changed a few times. Finally, he snorted and sat down heavily. There was a rumbling sound and the whole altar shook. Xing Fulia looked at Zhang Yan. He thought for a while and said, Young sect leader, you have an important task and can't go. But we can't let Xian Yu be so arrogant. I think that Taoist Zhang's cultivation is profound and similar to Elder Jin Ling's. Why don't young sect leader ask him to go into battle? Chapter 688. Seeing that she had successfully dissuaded Du Shushuan, the maidservant did not care what he had to say. She threw down the golden hairpin and immediately returned to the carriage to report. Welcome to the reading. When Madame Zhao heard her report, she was relieved. After all, Du Shushuan could not reveal his family's methods yet, lest Rong Juanzhong be wary of him. She raised her delicate head and coldly sized up the golden spirit elder who was flying in the sky. She frowned and said, Husband, this person is really detestable. He actually came back to challenge us. He's really going too far. Why don't you ask Elder Yen to fight him? Leader Qiao seemed to be tempted, but after some thought, he shook his head and said, Elder Yen is an honorable person. It is not appropriate to make a move. Madame Zhao was slightly annoyed and said, Then what should we do? The old man Jin Ling has fought 2 rounds in a row, but he doesn't seem to be tired at all. The only people in our sect who can defeat him are my husband, Sun, fellow Taoist Hui Xian, Elder Yen, and a few others. If he doesn't go, he won't let Sun, and fellow Taoist Hui Xian go. Leader Qiao said lightly, Then just send anyone. As long as it is not a cultivator from Zhongtai, it will be fine. Madame Zhao was shocked. How can he win? Sect Master Qiao snorted and sneered. According to what I know, that Yang Shuyong has been trying to get rid of the Golden Spirit Elder for a long time. Now, it seems like he wants to use me to get rid of him. How can I let him have his way? Madame Zhao hesitated and said, But husband, this battle is very important. If we don't win and lose, we will be trapped in the mountains. Leader Qiao held her hand and said, If Xian Yu wins again, the next person to fight will be Rong Juanzhong. At that time, I can ask Sun, to go and we will know the result in one battle. There is no need to drag others into this. It will also help Zhongtai preserve some of its strength. Zhongtai was not as good as before. He did not want to see even one of their cultivators die. The key to this battle was still Rong Juanzhong. If Du Shushuan could defeat him, then there would be no more suspense in this battle. The cultivators from the 2 sects could not continue fighting to the death. Madame Zhao couldn't help but say, Husband, you put all the pressure on Sun. Isn't this too much? However, sect leader Qiao remained silent. Madame Zhao sighed and said, All right, since this is my husband's arrangement, I will naturally comply. However, just now, Sun has requested to fight and we cannot let him down. He has a Taoist Zhang under him, who is also a 2nd-stage cultivator. This person had once defeated Taoist Hui Xian's disciple, so his cultivation should not be shallow. Why don't we send him up? Sect leader Qiao nodded in approval. Since there is such a person, we can order him to fight against the enemy. At this moment, on another altar, Elder Bai had been waiting for a long time, but no one came forward to fight the Golden Spirit Elder. He said anxiously, Senior Martial Brother, why don't I deal with this person? This was the 2nd time he had asked to fight, but Elder Yen silently thought about it and still didn't agree. He said firmly, Junior Martial Brother Bai, your opponent is Chunyu Ji, not this person. Otherwise, why would you have hidden your cultivation for so many years? Wouldn't all his efforts be wasted? This person, let me deal with him. Elder Bai was shocked. Senior Martial Brother is the great elder of the school, how can you deal with him so easily? Elder Yen laughed and said, The Golden Spirit Elder is also the Xian Yu School's guardian elder. If he can fight, why can't I? Just as he was about to stand up, he heard a tremor from afar. He couldn't help but be surprised and stopped. Elder Bai tilted his head and looked. He realized that the movement came from the altar where Du Shixuan was. He said in surprise, "Could it be that Du Shixuan wants to fight?" Elder Yen shook his head and said, "Rong Juanzhong hasn't shown up yet. The sect leader will not allow him to fight with others." As he spoke, a dazzling ray of light shot up from the altar with a force that could tear the clouds apart. It went straight into the clouds and stood opposite the Golden Spirit Elder. After Elder Bai saw it, he relaxed slightly and returned to his seat. He smiled and said, "So it's Priest Zhang. This person is suitable. In terms of cultivation, he's about the same as the Golden Spirit Elder. Even if he can't win, he should be able to contend with him." Elder Yen looked over and stroked his beard. He said, "I've heard of this person before. He seems to have had some conflict with Hui Xian. He should have some ability." Elder Lin sneered at the side. "If this person dies, it's not bad. It'll let others know that following that kid won't end well." On the other side, at the Xianyu cult, sect Master Yang Shuyong's interest was piqued when he saw Zhang Yan enter the battle. He pointed at the foot of the mountain and said, "Who do you think will win this battle?" Someone below said, "The Golden Spirit Protector has cultivated for almost 1,000 years, and the fantasy fault hoop has been refined to the divine connection realm. Even if that person has some background, how can he be the Protector's opponent?" Chunyu Ji answered cautiously, "That person is of the same lineage as Shen Baishuang, so he is not a mediocre fighter. It's just that the Golden Spirit Protector has the ring escape space shift technique. Even if the battle is disadvantageous, he can retreat in time. This one thinks that the chances of victory and defeat are 50-50. After Zhang Yan stood still in the clouds, he cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Jin Ling, please." The Golden Spirit Elder saw Zhang Yan come up and examined him. He suddenly said harshly, "So it's Zhang Zhenren of the Deep Abyss sect. One of my Xianyu school's elders was killed by Shen Baishuang. Right now, I can't find Shen Daoist's whereabouts. I've long heard that you are of the same lineage as him, so I'll take your head back to worship." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised and then laughed. He bowed and said, "Many thanks to Golden Spirit Friend for telling you that we are enemies. Since that's the case, I definitely can't let you go. I'll do my best to take your life." Even though he was smiling and talking normally, his words were filled with murderous intent. The Golden Spirit Elder felt a strange coldness on his body. He quickly calmed his mind and said sarcastically, "What a big tone. It's still unknown who will kill you." Although he said it as if he had the upper hand, he didn't relax at all. He waved his sleeves and retreated dozens of feet. He then took out the golden rings that were refined by his heart. With a thought, many golden rings that were exactly the same appeared and scattered in the sky. As he activated his mysterious technique, the golden rings became denser and denser. At first glance, there were at least tens of thousands of them. They intertwined with each other and it was hard to tell what was real and what was fake. He had refined a total of 512 illusionary palace rings. Only the main ring that was connected to his mind was one. It was also the most powerful. When he fought, he hid in the secondary rings and the illusionary rings, waiting for an opportunity to attack the enemy. Other than that, he could also fly in any of the rings, making it hard for the enemy to guard against him. As long as the enemy was careless, they would lose their life. After he finished using the rings, he pointed with his finger and a golden light flew out. Zhang Yan had seen the Golden Spirit Elder fight just now and had a general understanding of this person's methods. He already had a plan to defeat the enemy. It wasn't difficult to defeat this person, but to take his life, it would take a lot of effort. Xianyu had seized the 4 mountains and had the geographical advantage. For the cultivators in the Zhongtai area, flying in the air was greatly restricted. If the Golden Spirit Elder felt something was wrong, he could immediately hide inside. In this short period of time, even if he had the sword escape technique, he wouldn't be able to catch up and kill the enemy in time. Therefore, once he attacked, he would have to find a way to kill the enemy. At this moment, when he saw the golden rings coming, he didn't dodge and allowed them to fall. The Golden Spirit Elder was stunned at first, but then he was overjoyed. He quickly chanted and replaced the rings. As long as he could trap the enemy, he would be able to strangle him to death like Qin Shogu. At this time, Zhang Yanqing let out a shout, and a 5-colored light suddenly appeared behind him. After a flash, a green light suddenly climbed up, and it was full of vitality. It kept the falling golden ring 3 feet away, and no matter how hard it buzzed and tried to restrain it, it couldn't force its way in. Ever since the Golden Spirit Elder refined the Illusion Palace rings, he had never seen someone who could catch the rings without using magic treasures. He couldn't help but be shocked. His expression fluctuated a few times, and with a wave of his hand, the tens of thousands of golden rings in the sky moved in unison, converging towards Zhang Yan from all directions. When Zhang Yan saw this, he smiled slightly. The green light behind him shone brightly, and in an instant, it split into tens of thousands of rays of light. It looked like a giant tree that reached the heavens. It extended its branches and tendrils, twisting, and every branch locked onto a ring. The Golden Spirit Elder's expression changed dramatically. He kept activating his cultivation method, creating rings within rings and dividing qi within qi. However, with every ring, there would be an additional green light within the green light. Whether it was real or illusionary, it would all be blocked outside. In the end, the sky was filled with green light. Not only that, the green light spread outwards, causing him to have no choice but to consume his Fa Li to resist it. As a result, he fell into a battle of Fa Li that he was least proficient in. Zhang Yan's Fa Li was extremely strong. Among those of the same generation, there were very few who could fight against him. At this moment, when he activated his Fa Li, it was like an endless tide that surged towards him. The Golden Spirit Elder only lasted for a while before he felt that he couldn't suppress it anymore. First, the golden rings that filled the sky continuously disappeared and dissipated into spiritual energy. Then, the secondary rings broke one after another. In less than 10 breaths, more than half of the rings were destroyed. The Golden Spirit Elder's body was covered in cold sweat. He was shocked and thought to himself, what cultivation method does this Taoist cultivate? How can his Fa Li be so strong? Even compared to Sage Rong, he's probably not much weaker. He knew that if this continued, he would definitely exhaust all of his Fa Li. At that time, he wouldn't even be able to escape. Instantly, the thought of retreating arose in his mind. At this moment, the thought of taking revenge for his fellow sect members had already been tossed far away. Zhang Yan immediately sensed his retreat. He sneered and let out a loud shout. First, he retracted some of his magic power and allowed the golden rings to return. Then, he shook his arms and the wood elemental true light around him suddenly surged. With a cracking sound, the golden rings on his body shattered. At the same time, the golden rings that filled the sky also fell to the ground. Then he took a step forward and disappeared from his original position. When the golden rings that he refined with his heart's blood were broken, the Golden Spirit Elder felt as if he was struck by lightning. A mouthful of blood surged up and he spat it out. Fortunately, his mind was still clear. Almost at the instant he felt that something was wrong, he had already circulated his technique with the intention of escaping. However, right at this moment, an enormous force surged over and actually forcefully pressed him down on the spot. His body trembled abruptly before he spat out a mouthful of blood once more. Terror appeared on his face as he cried out involuntarily. The Heavenlock restriction. He hadn't finished speaking when Zhang Yan had already appeared out of thin air and arrived before him. Clang! Zhang Yan drew the sword on his waist before suddenly swinging it down. A clear radiance flashed in the sky before a head shot into the sky. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and caught the head. When he glanced at it, his face still carried a slight expression of astonishment and disbelief. He laughed with ridicule before flicking his sleeve with a swish and lifting the head up, and then he rode the strong cloud back down. Chapter 689. From the moment Zhang Yan teleported to the front of the Golden Spirit Elder, to pulling out his sword and decapitating him, it was all in the blink of an eye. Only when he returned with the head did everyone react. Du Shixuan suddenly stood up from his seat. His eyes flickered with divine lights, and his face was filled with excitement. He glanced at the few elders around the altar with disdain, and then he started laughing loudly. Xing Fuliu, who was sitting beside him, was even more dumbfounded and could only stare blankly. Elder Yan's movements paused, he held onto his beard and did not move. After a long while, he shook his head and said, "I made a mistake, I made a mistake." Elder Lin and Elder Bai's faces were filled with shock and surprise. Not mentioning the position of the Golden Spirit Elder in Xianyu sect, just by looking at how he easily defeated the three people, used the 10,000 rings to cover the sky, and easily traveled through the air, one could tell how powerful he was. But such a person still died in the hands of Zhang Yan in the blink of an eye. Just how powerful was the latter? Sect Master Qiao stared blankly. He'd originally given up on this battle and was prepared to wait for the next battle to decide the outcome. But he'd never imagined that the Golden Spirit Elder would actually be killed by a single sword strike from Zhang Yan, and this huge contrast caused him to be momentarily speechless. Madame Zhao, who was beside him, could not take it anymore and pushed him lightly, saying, "Husband, Zhang Jinren won, he should be rewarded handsomely." Sect leader Qiao then came to his senses and nodded. Right. Someone come, pass on my order. Zhang Jinren killed an elder of Xianyu. According to the gifts, he will be rewarded, and also a celestial city. Madame Zhao said again, "The Golden Spirit Elder is the great protector of Xianyu, he is not an ordinary person. Husband, why don't you invite Zhang Jinren to the carriage for a chat?" Sect Master Qiao had already calmed down. To be able to win a round against Xianyu. To be able to win against Xianyu and get rid of the great protector, it was not a bad thing. He said cheerfully, "Madam is right, I have been negligent. Pass on the order, invite Zhang Jinren to the carriage." 10 miles away from the carriage, there was a lonely altar. This was where Hui Xian Elder and his disciples were at. Because Hui Xian Elder did not like noise and he was not under Zhongtai, there was a distance between them. At that moment, he was standing next to Luo Dongchuan. After a while, he slowly withdrew his gaze and said, "Old man Jin Ling has indeed lost." Luo Dongchuan wasn't surprised at all. He sneered and said, "I've said it before. Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong. A first-grade golden core was formed. Within 100 years, he had mastered the Yuanying technique and was the #1 swordsman of the Donghua 16 sects. That old man was able to exchange 2 blows with him. It's not bad." Hui Xian old forefather frowned and thought for a while before saying, "With this kind of person around, it will be disadvantageous to our plans." Only when Zhongtai was weak would he have the confidence to convince sect leader Qiao to let the Python tribe in. With Zhang Yan around, Zhongtai's chances of winning would undoubtedly increase, and this was not what he wanted to see. Luo Dongchuan lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, "There's still no news from my eldest brother, so we'll have to endure it for now. I'd also like to advise fellow Taoist, it's best if your disciple doesn't provoke this person." Hui Xian old forefather said indifferently, "There's no need for fellow Taoist Luo to worry about this. As for how to teach my son, I, Daoren, know what to do." Luo Dongchuan said indifferently, "I'm just reminding you out of goodwill. Whether you take it or not, it's all up to you." In order to deal with Zhang Yan, the Python tribe had already sent messengers to the Middle Pillar continent to invite Fierce to take action. Before there was any news from the tribe, he didn't want to fight with them. If it wasn't for the fact that Hui Xian and Luo Dongchuan could be considered allies and still be of use to the Python tribe before they succeeded, he wouldn't have bothered to say another word. It would be best if he just let Luo Dongchuan fight until his head bled. At this moment, Zhang Yan had already returned to the altar. When his feet touched the ground, he threw the head in his hands onto the ground and bowed to Du Shixuan. "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." Du Shixuan laughed loudly and came up to him. He held his arm and shook it forcefully. Fellow Taoist Zhang beheaded the enemy with 1 strike. How awesome! Xing Fuliu, on the other hand, squeezed out a smile and also came up to congratulate him. Fellow Taoist Zhang has made a great contribution and will definitely be appreciated by the sect master. At this moment, a Taoist boy came over and said, "The sect master has an order to invite Master Zhang to Pu Lao flying carriage for a chat." Du Shishun laughed again and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, this is a good thing. I'll go with you." He then took half a step forward and said in a low voice, "I wonder where the primordial spirit of old Jinling is? Could it be that fellow Taoist released him?" Zhang Yan smiled and raised his sword. He placed 2 fingers on the sword's ridge and lightly drew a line. The cold light was like water, reflecting the reflection of a mirror. Inside the mirror, there was a distorted silhouette drifting back and forth. He said, "Old Jinling's primordial spirit is here. As the great guardian of Xianyu, he must know a lot of secrets. Capture him and give him to Master Zhang as a big gift." Du Shishun glanced at Zhang Yan. After getting his permission, he took out the sword and looked at it. Not only was the blade sharp, there was also a bloody glow around it. It was obvious that it had drunk a lot of blood. The killing intent was so strong that it made his eyes hurt. It was a rare weapon. He couldn't help but show a strange light in his eyes. He praised, "Good sword." Zhang Yan chuckled and took off the scabbard. He handed it to Du Shishun and said, "If fellow Taoist Du likes it, I'll give it to you." He had obtained this magic sword from an elder of the Blood Soul sect during the competition between the 16 sects. Even though it wasn't a supreme treasure, it had the ability to capture and absorb souls. The Golden Spirit Elder had been killed by his sword, and his origin spirit had been sucked into the magic sword, unable to escape. He still had quite a few magic swords like this. He didn't have any use for them, so he gave them away without blinking. Du Shishun was startled, but he quickly took it and put it back into the scabbard. He said, "Since it's a gift from fellow Taoist Zhang, I'll accept it." Xing Fuliu was filled with jealousy. It seemed like Zhang Yan was giving him a sword, but even he could tell that with Du Shishun's temper, he would never take advantage of others. When the time came, he would definitely pay back tenfold. Thinking about how Zhang Yan had already obtained a celestial city, and who knew what other benefits he would get later, Xing Fuliu's eyes turned red. Unlike Zhong Tai, the atmosphere at Xianyu sect was oppressive. Sect Master Yang Shuyong stared at the headless corpse that his disciple brought back. He was silent for a long time with a gloomy face. No one noticed that his hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, were trembling slightly. Even though his original intention was to borrow Zhong Tai's hand to get rid of the Golden Spirit Elder, he was secretly delighted that he didn't get rid of this person. Instead, he became more irritated. At this moment, he raised his head and said, "Which one of you wants to tell me what kind of technique that Taoist Zhang used? Mo Shirtong, didn't you boast that you are knowledgeable? I'll let you tell me." The Protector Elder, who was named, paused. He stammered, "Sect Master, when that Taoist Shin used his technique, the clouds surged and the water flowed, and the tides swirled. But this person seemed to be different." Before he could finish, Yang Shuyong interrupted him coldly, "Don't waste your breath." The Protector Elder could only shut his mouth awkwardly. After a long time, someone said in a low voice, "This kind of technique, I've never heard of it." Hearing this, Yang Shuyong suddenly said angrily, "You're all a bunch of trash. This person has such a technique, why did no one report it to me?" Everyone lowered their heads and didn't dare to breathe too loudly. They didn't know why he was angry. Only the commanding elder, Chunyu Ji, could guess the reason. In terms of cultivation level, few in the sect could compare to the Golden Spirit Elder. If this Taoist Zhang could kill this elder, it meant that he could kill others, even Yang Shuyong. With such an unexpected variable appearing, it was no wonder that the sect master lost his composure. At this moment, a deep voice came from behind. "This person's cultivation level is not low. In our sect, there are very few who can match up to him. Sect Master, don't worry. If we meet again, if this person dares to show himself, I will deal with him." As soon as this person spoke, the Protector Elders on both sides immediately showed respect and made a path for him. A tall cultivator with an imposing appearance walked over. This person wore a wide robe with a bird's crown on his head. As he walked, there seemed to be wind and thunder following him. His eyes were like lightning, frightening people's souls. With one look, one could tell that he was a hero among men. When Yang Shuyong saw this person, he retracted his imposing manner and said happily, "Zhenren Rong has come out of seclusion?" Rong Juanzhong walked over and looked around. Everyone avoided his gaze. He cupped his hands at Yang Shuyong and said, "Just now, I have gained something. Thank you, sect master, for worrying about me." Yang Shuyong carefully looked at his face and couldn't help but say happily, "Jinren Rong's cultivation has indeed improved." When Rong Juanzhong came to Sleeping Star Mountain with the cultivators of Shenyu, he seemed to have suddenly understood something. After giving a few simple instructions, he opened up a cave abode and went into seclusion. At that time, Shenyu sect was also very nervous. Fortunately, at this moment, not only was he fine, he seemed to have gained some sort of comprehension. This was very exciting. Although Yang Shuyong was the head of the sect, the reason why he could sit in this position was related to Rong Juanzhong's support. Thus, he treated him differently from others. He was very polite and asked for guidance. "Now that I, Shenyu sect, lost for a while, according to Jinren Rong's opinion, what should we do now?" Originally, the 6 mountains were sealed, but after Zhang Yan won for a while, he broke an opening. If they wanted to seal it again, it wouldn't be as simple as taking 1 or 2 mountains. Although it wasn't impossible, Zhong Tai wouldn't sit and wait for death. The difficulty would definitely increase. Rong Juanzhong didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be thinking of a solution. After a while, he said, "Just now, I have come out of seclusion and want to find someone to test my divine power on. I will accept the challenge, but before that, I have something to do." This 3rd-level cultivator of Yuanying was very important in the sect. Jinren he also thought that he was the most likely person to become a grotto heaven after him and inherit the orthodoxy of Shenyu. Thus, Yang Shuyong attached great importance to him. He quickly said, "Jinren, please speak." Rong Juanzhong said seriously, "Just now, I saw Taoist Zhang's sword light up and took away Jinling Guardian's primordial spirit. Chief has to redeem the elder's head and primordial spirit, otherwise, the people in the sect won't be stable." Yang Shuyong was shocked. He nodded his head and said, "Thank you for reminding me, Jinren Rong." He cursed in his heart. If Zhang Yan directly destroyed Elder Jinling's primordial spirit, it would save him a lot of trouble. However, Elder Jinling was still the great guardian of the sect. If he knew that his primordial spirit was still there, but he still ignored it, other than a few of his trusted subordinates, there wouldn't be many who would be willing to help. Rong Juanzhong looked behind him and said, "Chief, Jinling Guardian is a founding member of the previous generation. Even if Zhong Tai's request is a little harsh, there's no harm in agreeing to it. As long as we win the battle, we don't have to worry about not getting it back." Chapter 690. Zhang Yan followed Du Shixuan to the Paleo flying carriage. Just as he stood still, sect leader Qiao and Madame Zhao stood up to welcome him personally, showing their respect and giving him a lot of face. After greeting, Du Shixuan took a step forward and presented the sword in his hand. He said loudly, "This sword was given to me by fellow Zhang. I now present it to my father." Sect leader Qiao smiled. "Is it the sword that fellow Zhang used to kill Elder Jinling?" Du Shixuan moved his hand higher and said, "That's right." Sect leader Qiao saw how serious he was and knew that this magic sword was not as simple as it seemed. He first glanced at the stairs, then slowly stepped forward and reached out to take a look. He couldn't help but stare and said, "Old Jinling's primordial spirit?" Madame Zhao's eyes widened as well. She leaned over and said with surprise, "Husband, it really is this old man." Sect leader Qiao's expression was calm, but his heart was overjoyed. Elder Jinling's position as the guardian elder was given to him by the previous sect leader. Not only was he familiar with Shenyu, but he could also get some clues about the techniques that the cultivators in the sect practiced. Even if he couldn't get anything out of him, he must know the details of the various celestial cities in Shenyu. Now that it was in his hands, it was undoubtedly beneficial to Zhong Tai. He was in a good mood and couldn't help but smile. "My son has given me a big gift." Du Shixuan cupped his fists. "I don't dare to take credit for this. This is all fellow Zhang's ability." Sect leader Qiao's gaze shifted to Zhang Yan and said seriously, "That is indeed the case. Come, give him the coiling dragon chair." Immediately, 6 disciples brought over a large chair. When the chair was laid out, it took up an area of 10 feet. There were over 100 flood dragons carved on the chair, each with angry eyes and long beards. Upon closer inspection, it seemed like they were still slowly swimming around. It was as if they were alive, which was really shocking. However, Zhang Yan's vision was good, so he could see that the abnormality was caused by the chair drawing spiritual energy from the ground and not a living dragon. Madame Zhao said with a smile, "This coiled dragon chair was created by our founding master when he killed 100 green dragons and used their bones to refine it. It has always been used to entertain important guests." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Sect Leader Qiao." Sect Leader Qiao gestured and said, "Fellow Taoist, please take a seat." Zhang Yan took a few steps back. After Sect Leader Qiao and his wife sat down, he also sat down. As soon as he sat down, he felt his entire body being enveloped by a cool spiritual aura, and his eyes and ears became clear. His entire body felt comfortable, and even his spiritual vigor flowed much faster. It was almost comparable to when he was cultivating in the Great Pagoda Pavilion. He could not help but nod to himself. This fruit was a rare treasure. Qiao Zhangmeng said, "Zhang Zhenren has killed the golden spirit old man. My Zhongtai has eliminated a great enemy, and also bestowed me with a magical sword. I don't know how to thank you." Zhang Yan replied, "Sect Leader Qiao is overpraising me. Since I have signed the contract, of course I will be loyal to you." Qiao Zhangmen unconsciously nodded. He turned his head to a servant and said, "Men, bring fellow Taoist Zhang's gift list." The disciple didn't dare to hesitate. He quickly searched for it and took it out, respectfully presenting it in front of the table. Qiao Zhangmeng took a look at the gift list. He could not help but be surprised. The item that Zhang Yan asked for was different from the others. It was not a pill or a talisman. Instead, it was something that San Wei suspected to be used by the cultivators of the evil sect to cultivate. He was puzzled. Could it be that fellow Taoist Zhang is related to the cultivators of the evil sect? He had already found out from Madame Zhao that Zhang Yan and Shen Baishuang, who occupied the divine house and started the sect, were of the same lineage. He originally came from another continent, so he did not think that Zhang Yan was a member of the evil sect. After thinking for a while, he could not get the gist of it, so he simply tossed the matter aside. He pointed at the gift list and asked Madame Zhao, "Madam, other than the ones in the treasury, do you still have more of these 3 items?" Madame Zhao turned her eyes and looked at it. She pondered for a moment and said, "If I remember correctly, these spiritual medicines were obtained after we broke through the corpse cult's mountain gate. However, after we occupied the celestial city, we obtained more of them. Because they were not too important, we did not store them in the treasury. These items are of Ean's splendor and are useless for the cultivation of my sect's disciples. Of course, we still have quite a lot of them. However, we will have to go back before we can slowly examine them." Zhang Yan smiled. These 3 spirit herbs weren't some kind of treasure. If sect leader Qiao gave the order to search for them, he didn't believe that he couldn't get them. Most likely, sect leader Qiao wanted to tie him down so that he could continue to work for Zhongtai. Sect leader Qiao said apologetically, "If that's the case, I can only wait until after the Dragon Pillar meeting to search for them. If fellow Taoist has any other requests, please do not hesitate to tell me. I will definitely find a way to fulfill them." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "I do have one thing that I would like to ask sect leader Qiao to give me some face. However, it is not convenient to mention it now. Let's talk about it after the battle." If there was a chance, he would return the favor to the 6th prince. However, now was not the right time to talk about it. Sect leader Qiao had the intention to rope him in, so he was not afraid that he would reach out to him. He was only afraid that he would not have any desires. He did not want to get to the bottom of the matter. He smiled and said, "That's fine too. After I defeat Shen Yu, I will drink and chat with fellow Taoist Zhang." As the 3 of them spoke, the cultivators and elders on the other spell altars could all see it clearly. Zhang Yan was treated with such courtesy by sect leader Qiao and his wife. Many cultivators who were recruited were extremely envious. They were all thinking about how to kill cultivator Xianyu so that they could earn a celestial city like him. At this moment, a Taoist child boarded the flying carriage and said, reporting to sect leader, an envoy from Xianyu has come. He said that he has something important to discuss with sect leader. Sect leader Qiao smiled as if he had expected it. He said in a clear voice, please. At this moment, Zhang Yan stood up and bowed. He said, sect leader Qiao has something to do here. In that case, I will take my leave. Du Shixuan was about to leave as well, but sect leader Qiao said, Sun, or stay. Father still has something to say to you. Du Shixuan sat down again. Zhang Yan bowed and rode his light back to the spell altar. Not long after, a thin Daoran wearing a gourd crown came up. He bowed with a Dao salute and said, Protector Xianyu, Mo Shitong, greets sect leader Qiao and Madam. Sect leader Qiao also greeted him politely and asked, Fellow Taoist Mo, why did sect leader Yang send you here? Mo Shitong said, Sect leader Qiao, I'm here on the orders of our sect's sect leader Yang. I want to redeem the head of Protector Jinling's primordial spirit. Sect leader Qiao said, Redeem? Mo Shitong said, That's right. Protector Jinling is the great protector of our sect. Sect leader could not bear to see his spirit being left outside and unable to reincarnate. Thus he sent me here. I hope that sect leader Qiao will allow us to redeem him on account of the friendship between our two sections. Sect leader Qiao grunted and seemed to be considering. Mo Shitong did not dare to rush him and could only wait patiently below. After a while, sect leader Qiao spoke again. Fellow Taoist Mo is right. Our two sects belong to the same lineage. Protector Jinling's head can be returned to your sect and his corpse can be buried in one piece. As for the primordial spirit, it will be difficult. Since Protector Jinling was killed by immortal Zhang, he should have the right to dispose of it. Moreover, he is not a disciple of Zhongtai, so I cannot interfere. Mo Shitong hurriedly said, Sect leader Qiao, as long as you can release Elder Jinling's primordial spirit, I, Xianyu, will repay you with generous gifts. Sect leader Qiao thought for a while and said, How about this? I can order fellow Taoist Zhang to return Protector Jinling's primordial spirit to you after the duel. What do you think? Xianyu wanted to redeem the primordial spirit of Elder Jinling. As the sect leader Qiao naturally understood the reason behind it. However, since the two sects had yet to determine the victor, it was better to have one more bargaining chip in his hand. Mo Shitong could tell that sect leader Qiao was unwilling to release Elder Jinling's primordial spirit. Helpless, he could only return to the formation to report. He was prepared to be punished, but after Yang Shuyong heard it, he only sneered and waved his hand, dismissing Mo Shitong. Rong Juanzhong lightly said, Since Zhongtai is not willing, it is not a big deal. Later, I will capture a few Elder Zhongtai and bring them over to exchange for Elder Jinling's primordial spirit. He said that he had captured and killed Elder Zhongtai in such an understated manner, but none of the Xianyu sect disciples didn't believe him. This was because 3 of Zhongtai's 9 elders had already died in his hands. Moreover, it seemed that this great cultivator's cultivation had advanced a step further than before. An elder sighed and said, I, Xianyu, am very fortunate to have Venerable Rong. Everyone nodded in agreement. At this moment, Chunyuji said, Sect leader, it is getting late. It is time for me, Xianyu, to send people into battle. Yang Shuyong looked at the sky. Only a few battles had passed and 4 hours had passed. It was nearing dusk. He solemnly bowed to Rong Juanzhong and said, I will leave everything to you, Venerable Rong. Rong Juanzhong returned the bow and said, With me here, please do not worry, sect leader. Having said this, he tapped his feet and spread out his sleeves. A ball of rumbling wind and thunder enveloped him as he flew up to the blue sky and stood proudly on the clouds. Seeing him come up, the people under Zhongtai were shocked and whispered, Rong Juanzhong? It was the first time for many of the cultivators outside the sect to see this person. They saw that he was extraordinarily talented and strong. At this moment, as he stood proudly in the sky, the wind blew and the clouds avoided him. From afar, it was as if there was a hole in the sky. Only Du Shixuan looked excited. He turned around and cupped his fists, saying, "Father, since this person has appeared, I will go and meet him." He then leaped into the sky. Wait. Sect leader Qiao called out to him. Du Shixuan was so anxious that he almost jumped up and down. He pointed to the sky and said, "Father, you said that this person is my opponent." Madame Zhao said, "So, what's the rush? Let your father finish." Sect leader Qiao's expression was solemn as he said, 16 years ago, during the battle, I met Rong Juanzhong. At that time, he did not have this kind of aura. This person's skills have improved again." Madame Zhao was shocked. "Husband, is that true?" Sect leader Qiao nodded slowly. Madame Zhao's expression changed. She was also a nascent soul Jinren and understood the crux of it. When a cultivator reached the third level of nascent soul realm, every step forward was extremely difficult. Just like Hui Xian Grandmaster who entered the third level of nascent soul realm, he only polished his mana slightly and after a few hundred years, he actually did not improve much. However, Rong Juanzhong was only separated by 16 years, yet sect leader Qiao was able to see that his cultivation had improved. That was no small matter. Sect leader Qiao said in a low voice, "I need to send someone to test him." Madame Zhao said worriedly, "But this person's skills are too high. Who would be willing to fight with him?" While they were discussing countermeasures, Rong Juanzhong spoke from the cloud, "I heard that the Zhongtai sect has a reward for killing me. Anyone who kills me will be rewarded with 3 cities and become sworn brothers with sect Master Qiao. I am truly fortunate to be valued so highly by your sect. Today, I will accept 3 challenges from your sect. If anyone can force me to take a step back, the Xianyu sect will reward him with an immortal city." Chapter 691. Once Rong Juanzhong said this, Xian Yu's side had mixed reactions. Elder Bai sneered, "How arrogant." Elder Yan's expression was tense. Rong Juanzhong must have something to rely on if he dared to say such words. Just as he was thinking of a countermeasure, a disciple ran up the altar and cupped his hands. "Master, sect leader has an order that Rong Juanzhong's cultivation has improved greatly. He ordered Master to find a few people to test the waters." Elder Lin was dissatisfied. "Rong Juanzhong should be the one to fight. Why do we have to do it?" Elder Yen stopped him from grumbling. "No need to say more. Sect leader is right. We need to be careful." No matter how arrogant Du Shixuan was, he was the only one in Zhongtai sect who could match up to Rong Juanzhong. To defeat Xianyu, they needed to rely on him. As for Hui Xian Elder, although he was also a third-degree cultivator, he was not from Zhongtai sect. His presence here was just to add some deterrence. It was wishful thinking to expect him to fight to the death. Elder Bai said, "Senior brother, everyone knows of Rong Juanzhong's reputation. I'm afraid no one will be willing to go." Although they were recruited from outside the sect and all the cultivators inside had to sign the contract, they could not be forced to retreat without a reason. Elder Lin pondered for a while. "Senior brother, I have an idea. Since Rong Juanzhong is so arrogant, why don't we send a few people to see what he does?" Elder Yen thought for a while and said, "That's fine too. Junior brother Lin, go and make the arrangements. Just say that Zhongtai sect will not force anyone to fight to the death with Rong Juanzhong. We will only send a few people to test the waters. If the situation is not good, we will allow them to turn back and we will not blame them." Elder Lin Daoren said, "That will be much easier." Elder Yen thought for a moment, then took out a palm-sized dancing golden copper crane from his sleeve. "Bestow this treasure to them. Say that it can help them escape in times of danger." When Elder Lin saw this dancing crane, he said in shock, "Senior brother, why did you lend this treasure? Let me say something unpleasant. If the people below were to lose the battle, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to get it back." Elder Yen waved his hand and said, "If we are unwilling to part with our treasures, how can we send people forward? Junior brother, quickly go and make arrangements." Elder Lin still had a look of pity on his face. This dancing golden copper crane had the ability to break through spiritual restrictions. With this treasure, even if he encountered the heaven and earth lock, he could use it to escape. While sighing in pity, he went to the altar next to him. When he arrived, he conveyed Elder Yan's intentions. Immediately, a few people were tempted. If they were to face Rong Juanzhong alone, none of them would be willing. After all, a third-stage realm cultivator's heaven and earth shackle was enough to put them in a dilemma. But if a few of them joined forces, it would be different as they could assist each other. Moreover, he had the help of a magical treasure. If he felt that something was wrong, he could retreat in time. After a while, 3 Taoists in similar Taoist robes came out, each holding a horsetail whisk. The fierce-looking Taoist walked to Elder Lin's side and spread his hands. He chuckled, "I and my 2 brothers are willing to go, Elder Lin. Elder Lin, you've brought the treasure." This Taoist spoke impolitely, but Elder Lin's face was filled with joy. He bowed and said, "So it's the 3 mystics of Mount Rao Gong. If the 3 of you are willing to come forward, I think Rong Juanzhong won't be able to gain any advantage." As he said that, he handed over the dancing golden copper crane in his hands. Mount Rao Gong was originally the lower house of Qing Xian sect, one of the 5 major sections. But in the past thousands of years, because Qing Xian sect had changed several times, it had actually become an independent sect. The person who spoke was called Tao Quanman. The other 2 were his junior brothers, Shi Chuanzu and Bai Quanqing. According to seniority, the 3 of them were on the same level as the sect master of Qing Xian sect. Tao Quanman swept his horsetail whisk and kept the dancing golden copper crane. He looked back at the figures in the sky and sneered, "Rong Juanzhong, what a great reputation. My 2 junior brothers, follow me to meet him and see what he's capable of." The 3 of them shook their shoulders and turned into rays of light that rushed into the sky. Xian Yu sect Master Yang Shuyong saw the 3 of them coming together and immediately sneered. Chunyu Ji walked over and said, "Sect Master, should we send someone up to help?" Yang Shuyong waved his hand and said, "No need. Mount Rao Gong and Qing Xian sect have been separated for 1,000 years. Many of their techniques have been lost, and they are no longer as glorious as they were in the past. Master Rong is more than enough to deal with them." At this moment, on the altar where Zhang Yan was, Xing Fulia became excited and said, "So it's the 3 fierce Taoists of Mount Rao Gong. This is going to be interesting." Zhang Yan nodded and asked with a smile, "Taoist Xing, do you know these 3 Taoists?" Xing Fulia said mysteriously, "Taoist Zhang has been staying in the north for a long time, so I'm afraid you don't know. Let's not talk about Shi and Bai, but Tao Quanman is different. I heard that he once obtained a treasure in the Shaotsong realm. He has always kept it a secret, but ever since he obtained that treasure he has never lost a battle. Rong Juanzhong is boasting just now, maybe he will suffer a little." After Tao Quanman stopped in midair, he looked at Rong Juanzhong with half-lidded eyes for a while, then casually cupped his hands and said, "Taoist Rong, I have a question. What you said just now, is it true?" Rong Juanzhong said, "Of course it is." Tao Quanman laughed and said, "I don't trust you. Why don't you make an oath?" Rong Juanzhong made a sound of acknowledgement and suddenly looked over with a sharp gaze. Tao Quanman looked like he didn't care at all. Rong Juanzhong looked at him and slowly said, "Everything I said just now is true. If I break my oath, may the heavens punish me." Tao Quanman laughed and said, "My 2 junior brothers, please protect me." Shi and Bai responded in unison and stood on either side of him. Tao Quanman said, "Zhenren Rong, be careful." He took out an item from his sleeve and threw it. It was originally about a foot long, but it suddenly grew to about 10 feet long. This magical treasure was completely black, and it looked like a palace pillar. There were 4 blades on each end of the top and bottom, and they revolved like a whirlwind and danced like a wheel. From time to time, a ball of 7-colored mist would erupt from it. It hadn't even arrived yet, but there was already an extremely strong suction force that tightly pulled Rong Juanzhong's body, causing his clothes to stick tightly to his back. This treasure was called the 100 Refinement Heart-Locking Pillar. Inside it were several types of gang sand collected by the founder of the Shaotsong state from the second heaven. They were known as metal sand, silver ice sand, wind sand, and poison silver sand. As long as a cultivator was grabbed by the pillar, the 4-colored gang sand would rush up and grind him into a pile of mud. When this item was found in the secret chamber of the Shaotsong state, even the master of the realm, Gu Xiangqing, sighed in admiration. When Zhang Yan saw this magical weapon, his eyes flickered. When he went to the Star Stone Sword duel, he went to the second heaven. If one were to be touched by the fierce Gang wind there, their flesh and blood would be gone. The spiritual vigor of the four-colored cloud was similar to the Gang wind. Even if he were to face this magical weapon now, he did not have much confidence in taking it head-on. He had to think of a way to avoid it. Rong Juanzhong just now said that he would not take a step back. It was up to him to deal with it. If he could not win, not only would he give up a celestial city, he would also lose face. Rong Juanzhong's expression was calm. He stood motionless and stared at the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar for a while. When it got closer, he suddenly shouted. At that moment, Tao Quan Man and the other two felt their bodies sink, as if they were hung by a 10,000-kilogram boulder. Tao Quan Man did not panic. This was a technique to seal heaven and earth. The other party was a Yuanying third heaven cultivator. This was within their expectations. He laughed coldly to himself. This technique could restrain them. This technique could restrain them, but it could not restrain a magical weapon. He flipped his wrist and took out the dancing golden crane. He held it in his palm and looked forward with a sinister smile. With this treasure in hand, even if a Dao technique or magical treasure were to attack him now, he could retreat in time. Rong Juanzhong had boasted in front of him, but he could not dodge it without any problems. Elder Lin watched from below, extremely excited. He said, Rong Juanzhong is trapped in his own cocoon. Let's see what he can do. Elder Yen stared at it without blinking. If this treasure could force Rong Juanzhong to dodge, it would definitely dampen Xian Yu's spirit. At that moment, hundreds of cultivators from both sects held their breaths and watched the battle. Even though the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar was flying slowly, it still arrived in front of Rong Juanzhong. Even now, his expression did not change. Right when the magic treasure was about to collide with him, he suddenly waved his hand, and the magic treasure seemed to be grabbed by something heavy. It suddenly stiffened and stopped in midair. Although it kept twisting and turning, it just couldn't move a single step forward. Shi and Bai saw that things were not going well and reacted quickly. They shouted and each sent out a magical weapon to attack. In an instant, two rays of light, one yellow and one white, went straight for Rong Juanzhong. However, when they were within 10 feet of him, they were like the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar. They shook violently and froze in midair. Even the light from the treasure dissipated, revealing two cold flying daggers. They buzzed and struggled, but they could not break free from the binding force. Sect leader Qiao's expression changed. He stood up abruptly and blurted out, 10,000 kilograms solidification? Then his expression became uncertain. Master Demi had passed down 3 great magical powers. This 10,000 kilograms solidification was one of them. When this magical power was used, it could freeze everything within 100 feet. For thousands of years, other than the second-generation sect leader in the Xian Yu sect, those who could practice this magical power were all Taoist masters. However, they never expected that Rong Juanzhong would be able to practice it again. Tao Quan Man was also panicking at that moment. He tried to activate the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar several times, but no matter how many times he made hand seals, it was useless. Although he was reluctant to let go of this treasure, he also knew that if he delayed any longer, he would lose his life. He pinched the dancing golden crane in his hand, and it instantly turned into a golden crane shadow. It protected the 3 of them and was about to escape. However, what shocked him was that although the golden light flapped its wings several times to fly away, it was as if it was stuck in a swamp. It could not move at all. Rong Juanzhong smiled coldly. He did not make any moves. He just gently waved his hand, and there seemed to be an undetectable white light flashing in midair. With a boom, Shi Chuanzu's body exploded and he died. With another finger, Bai Quanqing also died before he could make a sound. Tao Quan Man turned pale with fright. He took out several protective treasures and placed them on top of his head. However, just as he finished his action, there was another thunderous sound. When he looked again, he saw that he had exploded along with his treasures. In an instant, not even his bones were left. Sect leader Qiao suddenly lost his composure and stood up. His expression was one of shock and fear. His body trembled slightly. Madame Zhao saw that something was wrong and hurriedly came forward to ask, "Husband?" Sect leader Qiao gently stepped back. He shook his head and walked to the front of the carriage. He asked in a deep voice, "Taoist Master Rong, what kind of thunder technique is this?" Chapter 692. 3 Void 3 Sounds Thunder? When the cultivators on the stage heard this, there was an uproar. Of the 3 great divine abilities passed down by Patriarch Damo, the most profound was the 10,000 kilograms tranquility, and the most powerful was the 3 Void 3 Sound Thunder. However, because this divine ability was not easy to comprehend, it was split into 2 by Grand Master Demi and taught to 2 children, who were later the founders of Zhongtai and Xianyu sections. One of them received the first half and the other received the second half. Zhongtai had used this to deduce the sound silencing thunder technique, and Xianyu had created it from this 100-fold cloud shocking lightning. The cultivators of the 2 sects knew that only by combining the 2 scrolls into one could this great technique be used again. However, Rong Juanzhong said that he was using this technique just now. The cultivators of Zhongtai were all shocked. At first, sect leader Qiao was shocked, but now he had calmed down. He thought carefully, then suddenly raised his head and said, "That's not right. When the 3 sounds 3 air thunder is activated, it's invisible and colorless, and it's accompanied by a pleasant sound. Although your thunder technique is similar to the rumors, when you use it, there's white smoke. It's clearly derived from the 100-cloud shocking thunder." Not to mention the fact that the first volume was still in Zhongtai's hands. According to what he knew, once this divine ability was unleashed, the lightning would rub against each other, and the more it accumulated, the more violent it became, the more it exploded, and in the end, it covered the heavens and the earth. Everywhere the sound of the lightning passed, it became a purgatory, and it was absolutely not something that the noise before his eyes could compare to. Rong Juanzhong's expression did not change as he said, "Sect leader Qiao, you may not know this, but for thousands of years, Xianyu sect has used this sect's thunder technique as its foundation. We have learned from other sects' strong points and have finally achieved this technique. I believe that this technique is already 70% as powerful as the original technique. As long as Xianyu sect continues to produce outstanding talents, we will one day be able to break away from the old ways. It's not impossible for it to surpass Patriarch's technique." On the other side, Elder Yen couldn't bear to listen any longer. He said sternly, "Arrogant. Is the divine ability passed down by the ancestral master something that a junior like you can casually change? This is a treacherous and heinous act." Rong Jun chuckled and said, "What the founding master passed down is the founding master's Tao, not my Tao. Times have changed. Why should I, the descendants of the younger generation, cling to the established Tao?" I heard that sect master Qiao had long since wanted to pull himself together, but it was you bunch of rotten things who risked your lives to stop him. Like a rubber pillar, it bulged and trembled. Otherwise, there wouldn't be today's situation. When the junior disciples on the stage heard this, some of them were confused, some of them seemed to be deep in thought, and some of them looked confused. Elder Yen saw how Zhang Xian was able to stir up their emotions with just a few words. Instantly, he was both shocked and furious. He repeatedly said, "Shut up! Shut up!" Sect leader Qiao agreed with Rong Juanzhong's words. However, he couldn't say it out loud. He only said coldly, "Since you, Xianyu, have already formed your own clan, how can you steal this name?" Rong Juanzhong looked around. Raising his hand, he casually nodded and said nonchalantly, "Once you, Zhongtai, are dead, who would care?" The surroundings instantly fell into silence. Elder Yen was so angry that his entire body was shaking. He gritted his teeth and said, "Today, either you die or I die." Sect leader Qiao was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "There's no point in talking too much. Let's see who's the real deal." He returned to his carriage and called Du Shishun over. In a solemn voice, he asked, "Son, do you have any chance of winning against this person?" Du Shishun said proudly, "I have a heavenly armor, why should I be afraid of him?" Sect leader Qiao saw that his son was so full of fighting spirit. On one hand, he was gratified, but on the other hand, he was worried. Although Du Shishun was unstoppable in fights within the sect, Rong Juanzhong was a character that appeared once in 1,000 years. He was far from an ordinary person, and it was hard to predict who would win. Du Shishun took out a vermilion bird armor from his sleeve and put it on. When he was done, Madame Zhao came up to him and helped him put on the purple phoenix woven golden cloak that she borrowed from the Feng Xiang sect. She reminded him, "My son, you must be careful." Du Shishun said confidently, "Mother, don't worry. Rong Juanzhong has used 2 supernatural powers consecutively, which means that he has already exposed himself. I have a way to take him down." Madame Zhao nodded and said softly, "Go." Du Shishun took 2 steps forward and took out a formation-breaking wolf fang all that was about 10 feet long. He weighed it in his hands, and with a stomp of his feet, he rushed into the sky with his head held high. When Rong Juanzhong saw that it was him, he looked at him for a while and said, "I have long heard of fellow Taoist Du's name." Du Shishun pointed the formation-breaking all at him and said, "Rong Juanzhong, I will take your life today. What else do you have to say? Say it quickly." Rong Juanzhong actually looked serious and said, "I do have something to say to you later." Du Shishun snorted and did not have the patience to talk to him anymore. He suddenly shouted and raised the formation-breaking wolf fang all in his hand. With a whoosh, he smashed it down on Rong Juanzhong's head. A strong gust of wind immediately blew, and Rong Juanzhong's clothes fluttered under the pressure of the attack. Rong Juanzhong remained unmoved. Suddenly, a beam of white light shot out from the top of his head, and a cloud of smoke emerged from it. It looked like a human palm, but upon closer inspection, it was a 3-fingered fork. With a single thought, the fork flew out and collided with the array, breaking all. A loud clanging sound was heard, echoing for a long time. When Headmaster Qiao saw this item, his expression became slightly tense. The Xianyu school's 3 Guanghui essentials had 3 transformations: mountain transformation, cloud transformation, and earthquake transformation. When cultivated to a high level, it could be changed according to one's heart, making it impossible for others to grasp it. This 3-fingered fork had been refined by Rong Juanzhong and could change according to one's heart. In the last battle, the 3 elders of Zhongtai were not able to react in time and were killed before they could use their skills. Rong Juanzhong did not even use up much of his mana. If not for this, he would have been able to fight to a draw. When Du Shishun saw the 3-fingered fork coming towards him, he raised his heavenly weapon and wanted to push it away. Suddenly, he felt his hand sink, as if he was not holding onto a flying fork, but a mountain. His body was about to fall forward, but he did not panic. With a "hey," he tried to stabilize himself. But at this moment, the 3-fingered fork suddenly turned into a wisp of smoke and flew away. The head of the all became lighter. At this moment, just as he was exerting his strength, there was nothing in front of him, and he could not help but fall backward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the cloud of smoke circled around his body several dozen times in an instant, and then pulled inwards, actually binding him tightly. He suddenly let out a loud roar and shook his shoulders. His body suddenly grew taller, and in an instant he became 10 feet tall, and the cloud ropes around him collapsed. Rong Juanzhong's expression did not change. Under the guidance of his mind, the flying fork circled around Du Shishun and attacked him like a storm. It kept changing. Sometimes it was like a mountain pressing down, sometimes it was like a fine silk, and sometimes it was like a landslide. At its most powerful point, in the blink of an eye, it had changed more than 20 times. The people below were frightened, and they broke out in a cold sweat. With such a fierce attack, if they were not careful, they would be defeated and killed. While they were frightened, they were also shocked. Du Shishun was indeed a strength cultivator. His body was as strong as steel, and he was protected by a precious armor. Even if he was hit repeatedly, he would be fine. If it was them, they would not have been able to withstand it. Although Du Shixuan was not afraid, every time he tried to take a few hits to get closer to Rong Juanzhong, he was pushed back by the flying fork. Up until now, the distance between the two of them was getting farther and farther. At this moment, he was getting impatient. He kept the formation breaking all on his back, and with a surge of spiritual vigor, a ray of divine light appeared in his eyes. His eyes could see through the illusions of spiritual vigor, and at this moment he could see all the changes in the three-fingered fork clearly. Finding an opening, he punched, and with a loud bang, the cloud that was still changing was dispersed. Then he took a step forward and turned into a ball of red flames, rushing towards Rong Juanzhong. Elder Yen snorted and shook his head. "My son, you can't keep your composure. Your body is as strong as steel, so what if you get hurt a few times? If you keep this magical power, you can use it at a critical moment, and you can turn the tables. You shouldn't have used it so early." Rong Juanzhong's eyes narrowed. Strength cultivators usually did not have as long a time as Qi cultivators. He wanted to use the exquisite changes in the treasure to trap Du Shixuan and slowly exhaust his mana. Then he would find an opportunity to kill him. However, Du Shixuan could see through the changes, so he could only change his strategy. He thought for a while and came up with a countermeasure. His fingers pointed forward, and he did not hesitate to use his mana to cast the tremor formula. Du Shixuan didn't have a suitable method to deal with these changes, and he could only receive them head-on. However, these attacks were extremely violent, and he was shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. When he finally stopped, he'd already been pushed a few kilometers away. Rong Juanzhong flicked his sleeve again, and a black-furred spirit monkey jumped out from it. This monkey was extremely agile. With a few leaps, it jumped in front of Du Shixuan and scratched his face. Du Shixuan repeatedly waved his awl a few times, wanting to chase the spirit monkey away. However, after a few attempts, the spirit monkey easily evaded his attacks. Whenever he ignored it, the spirit monkey would come up and dig his eyes, scratch his face, or hug his legs and waist. Impatient, he silently recited a mantra and suddenly clenched his fist. There was a loud crack in midair, and the spiritual monkey's body shook. Blood flowed from its 7 orifices, and it froze. With another sweep of the awl, the monkey was smashed into pieces with a bang. However, Rong Juanzhong was indifferent. With this opportunity, he pointed his finger, and the flying fork flew high up into the sky. He chanted a mantra, and instantly, it turned into clouds of smoke. It slowly swirled, and layers of smoke piled up. Not long after, it became a towering mountain. He turned his hand and pressed it down, and it came crashing down. This mountain covered a radius of 30 miles. At this moment, it came crashing down, and even the sky darkened. Du Shixuan looked around and saw that the surrounding mountains were all mountains, and Rong Juanzhong was firmly guarding the escape route. There was no way to avoid it. He raised his head and looked up, but he was not afraid at all. Suddenly, he let out a fierce shout and shook his body. His body expanded again, and in one fell swoop, he reached a height of 500 feet. Both his feet stood on the ground, and he raised his hands. With a rumbling sound, his knees bent, and his body sank down slightly. In one move, he was able to support the misty cloud mountain. Just as he was about to push it away, Rong Juanzhong stretched out his hand. Suddenly, a jasper hammer flew towards his back. The momentum was too fast, and he could not use his divine weapon to block it. Relying on his sturdy body, he used his shoulder to block it. With a bang, he let out a muffled groan, and the armor on his shoulder shattered. Rong Juanzhong saw this and shook his head. He said, "Friend Du, why are you risking your life? Do you know that your father, Qiao Huanzhuan, and your mother, Zhao Ru, already have a 5-year-old son? The person who will take over the position of sect leader in the future will definitely be him. Today, they are just sending you to your death. Isn't it not worth it for you to die for Zhongtai? P.S. Chapter 693. Du Shixuan was startled at first, then he said angrily, Shut up. How can you call out the names of my parents? Madame Zhao's face turned pale and her body swayed. She gripped the armrest tightly and said with a trembling voice, "How did the Xianyu cult know about this?" Sect leader Qiao, on the other hand, was much calmer. He merely furrowed his brows and sighed, "I only hope that Sun'er will not be moved by these words." Although there was a saying that the Zhongtai sect leader's position would be succeeded by the son after the father's death, it was still too early to talk about succession. If Du Shixuan could defeat Rong Juanzhong and unite the two factions, his reputation would be unparalleled in the faction. It would only be a matter of time before he became the next sect leader. Although he had his own plans, he hadn't had the time to tell Du Shixuan about it. Now he was worried that Rong Juanzhong wasn't his biological son. He was afraid that Rong Juanzhong wouldn't be able to tell and would be disturbed by Rong Juanzhong's words. That would be very bad. On the altar far away, Luo Dongchuan, who was watching the battle, lowered his head and thought. Suddenly he looked over and stared at Hui Xian elder. After a long while, he then said, "Hui Xian fellow, don't tell me you are the one who spread the news?" Hui Xian elder's expression did not change and said calmly, "If Du Shixuan's Dao heart is firm, he will not be taken advantage of by others. What does it matter if Daoren says it or not?" Luo Dongchuan laughed and said, "Fellow Daoist, I admire your methods." Du Shixuan knew that Rong Juanzhong's words were meant to disturb his state of mind, but he was still a little upset and could not keep his composure. With a loud roar, he raised his head and a mouthful of true fire that he had cultivated for hundreds of years appeared in his abdomen. He circulated his qi and spat it out. The huge mountain above was scorched by this fire, and it actually showed signs of collapsing. Rong Junchong could sense the immense power contained within the fire. He was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage if he fought it head-on, so he immediately removed the spell on the three-fingered trident and called it back. When it fell into his hands, he examined it and his heart skipped a beat. The fire had only touched a little, but the three-fingered fork was already somewhat damaged. It was no longer as smooth as before. His expression couldn't help but change slightly. This flame was so powerful that if it touched his body, it would be almost impossible to resist. There was only this lump. It could take his life. He thought to himself, "I've heard of such a strange fire before. Could it be the Shaotsong stage's true fire of fierce qi? If that was the case, then where did Du Shixuan's strength path cultivation technique come from? It seems to make sense now." Thinking of this, the look in his eyes deepened. Du Shixuan saw that the true fire was working. The mountain range had already melted and there was nothing blocking his way. He took a deep breath. Then he spat out a mouthful of true fire. This time, he used Pang Shua's body to activate his divine ability. Thus, when the fire started, the entire mountain was covered in raging flames. Even the cultivators from the two sects who were watching the battle were affected. They hurriedly activated the forbidden formations on their respective altars, but even so, they still felt the heat wave burning their skin and a dull pain. Rong Junzhong was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. The pressure he felt was 100 times greater than the others. His expression turned serious. He waved his sleeves and two golden gongs flew out. They spun above his head and became bigger and bigger until they became the size of a mountain. Then he used his supernatural power to face the attack. When Elder Lin saw this item, he exclaimed, "Isn't this the treasure that senior brother Deng carried with him in the past?" Elder Bai's gaze was complicated. He sighed and said, "The item of my Zhongtai is used against the cultivators of my Zhongtai sect. How sad and hateful." In the previous two battles between the two sects, Xian Yu was the winner. Not only did they lose many elders and cultivators, even many of the treasures passed down by the seniors in the sect fell into the hands of the other party. This pair of 1,000 jade golden gongs was one of them. At this moment, the oncoming flames crashed into the surface of the gong with a loud bang. The golden gong shook violently a few times, as if it was letting out a mournful wail. After holding on for a few breaths, it seemed to be unable to bear the burden. With a cracking sound, a huge hole was torn open. Countless streams of flames rushed out from the hole, constantly tearing and expanding the hole. This treasure suffered such heavy damage and lost its spirituality. Under the continuous impact of the fierce fire, it finally could not withstand it and broke into pieces. Rong Junzhong took out an iron tablet from his sleeve and threw it into the air to block the fire. However, the fire was too strong. The iron tablet could only withstand the fire for a few breaths before it met the same fate as the pair of gongs. However, his expression was still calm. He continued to take out treasures and threw them into the air one by one to resist the fire. By the time the true fire was getting weaker, he had already thrown out 7 treasures, and 3 of them were profound artifacts. Such extravagant behavior made many people's eyes twitch. Elder Yan's expression was unusually ugly. These 7 treasures originally belonged to the Zhongtai sect. However, at this moment, they were used by Rong Junzhong to protect himself. Then he watched as they were destroyed. It was really distressing. Although Du Shixuan's real fire was formidable, every time he used it, it would decrease by a bit. Moreover, the consumption of his magical power was not small either. Gradually, he could no longer support his huge body and had no choice but to withdraw his technique and return to his original body. Unavoidably, he looked slightly dispirited. This slight change was immediately noticed by Rong Junzhong. Without waiting for Du Shixuan to make a move, Rong Junzhong activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique. When this technique was used, Du Shixuan's body suddenly sank and he could not help but groan. The Heaven and Earth Lock technique was originally not that important to a cultivator of strength path like him. However, now that he was exhausted, the restriction was much greater. Rong Junzhong saw that he could not stand steadily and immediately seized the opportunity. He raised his hand and a rainbow light shot out, sending the jasper hammer towards him again. Du Shixuan raised his spirits and shouted. He took out his divine weapon to block the hammer. Thousands of golden stars appeared on the hammer and it was slapped to the side. However, the jasper hammer did not go far before it flew back. At this moment, the 3-fingered fork also flew over and attacked from both sides. Du Shixuan had just now vented his anger. At this moment he had calmed down. He took out his divine weapon and calmly dealt with it. He was no longer in a hurry to rush forward. He thought to himself, if I want to kill this person, I need to find the right time to attack. It won't be like just now where I return empty-handed. To deal with Rong Junzhong, he had prepared for a long time. His techniques were not limited to what he had just seen. He wanted to slowly accumulate his mana and kill his enemy in one blow. He did not take the initiative to attack, and Rong Junzhong only used 2 magical weapons to deal with him. Both sides were wary of each other, and the battle was in a stalemate. Xing Fuliu could not help but feel disappointed. He said that Rong Junzhong is lucky that he did not get burned to death just now. Zhang Yan shook his head and said, Rong Junzhong is also someone who has been through hundreds of battles. Compared to him, fellow Du is a little lacking. Just now, when you activated the smelting flame, you were a little hasty and impatient. The timing you chose was also a little imprudent. If Rong Junzhong did not defend himself, I believe he would have a way to escape and would not have died. Xing Fuliu shook his sleeves and said, from what fellow Zhang said, it seems like you can take down this person? Zhang Yan smiled faintly and did not answer. Xing Fuliu thought that he was convinced by his words and could not help feeling proud. He said, Spiritual Master Zhang, young sect master seems to be at a disadvantage now, but it is not difficult for him to hold on. As long as young sect master gets a chance, there is still a chance to turn defeat into victory. Zhang Yan agreed with what he said. But even so, Du Shixuan's situation was not optimistic. Up until now, Rong Junzhong had not used the 10,000 kilograms calming or his sect's unique lightning technique. He only relied on his sect's Xian technique to deal with Du Shixuan. Zhang Yan could roughly guess his intentions. This person most likely didn't want to waste too much of his Fa Li in this battle. As to why he did so, he guessed that it was because he had scruples about Hui Xian Elder at the side and had no choice. Hui Xian Elder was also a Yuanying 3rd-tier cultivator. Regardless of whether he would go into battle or not, just sitting there was a huge threat. That was why Rong Junzhong had to hold back when dealing with Du Shixuan to prevent him from taking advantage. And when he was dealing with Tao Quanman and the other two, he used 2 supernatural powers consecutively. It was on purpose to deter this person and make him watch from the sidelines. Zhang Yan judged that since Rong Junzhong did this, he would definitely not let the battle drag on for too long. That would not be in line with his original intentions. Maybe he would use a risky move and try to get rid of his opponent in the shortest time possible. At the same time, this was what Du Shixuan wanted. Zhang Yan looked up with a deep gaze. It would not be long before the outcome would be decided. The two of them fought for another moment without any danger. Du Shixuan unknowingly got closer to Rong Junzhong. Looking at the distance between them, they were already within 700 feet. He had a supernatural power called treading on 3 mountains. Even under the heaven and earth imprisonment, he could still barely activate it. He thought that if he used it now, he would have some chance of winning. If he missed it now, he did not know if there would be such a chance next time. After making up his mind, he waved his divine weapon without hesitation and pushed the 3-fingered fork and the jasper hammer away. He took a step forward and suddenly turned into a ray of light. With a shocking momentum, he charged towards where Rong Junzhong was. In an instant, he was within 10 feet of him. But when he moved forward again, his body froze as if he was pressed down by a mountain. He was actually fixed on the spot. Du Shixuan's eyes narrowed. He knew that he was being controlled by the absolute freeze. But since Rong Junzhong used this supernatural power, it could be seen that he had no other way to fight back. With this judgment, he became excited. With a roar, his body lengthened again. He raised the formation-breaking Wolf Fang All and swung it heavily towards Rong Junzhong's head. At the same time, the stellar energy whirlpool around his body stirred and wrapped around his opponent tightly, not allowing him to escape. But at this moment, an object flew from below and attacked him from behind. Du Shixuan felt his hair stand on end as if he was in extreme danger. But if he dodged at this moment, all his previous efforts would be wasted. At this moment, there was no time for hesitation. Thus, he gritted his teeth and did not change the direction of the divine weapon in his hand. When sect leader Qiao saw this object, his expression changed. He did not care about the rules of the battle and hurriedly shouted, "My son, quickly dodge." Rong Junzhong seemed to be trapped by the stellar energy whirlpool and could not move at all. Just as the Wolf Fang All was a few feet away from hitting him, his body suddenly became blurry and he flew backwards like a light smoke. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, "Return to truth." At this moment, he heard a loud shout. When he looked again, Du Shixuan had already fallen from midair. Not only that, half of his body had been transformed by a ray of light. Chapter 694. The people from Zhongtai could see clearly that the thing that hit Du Shixuan was the 100 refinements heart-locking pillar that originally belonged to Taoist. After Taoist was killed, the magic treasure fell into Rong Junzhong's hands. Although this item was powerful, it was very slow. Even if a cultivator who was not good at escape techniques encountered it, as long as he was prepared, he would be able to avoid it. If Du Shixuan did not want to kill his enemy in one strike, he would not have been hit so easily. Rong Junzhong had obviously expected this and deliberately used himself as bait to lure Du Shixuan to fight with his life. Only then was he able to defeat his opponent. After Du Shixuan fell from the sky, he landed at the foot of the mountain and created a pit. At this moment, he only had one hand and one leg left. His body was bleeding all over and his charred internal organs and armor had fused together. He looked very miserable and badly mutilated. After a while, his eyes suddenly opened, revealing a bright light. He supported himself with one hand and propped himself up. He used his heart to examine himself and understood his situation. In order to resist the 4-colored astral sand, his entire body's magic power was almost exhausted. Fortunately, he had the purple phoenix woven gold cloak to block it, so he was not locked by the 100 refining stake. Otherwise, even with his strength path mysterious technique, he would still be turned into ashes. He looked at his left shoulder. After a while, a red light spurted out from the wound. After a few breaths, the light dissipated and an arm grew out. Just as he was about to restore his body and left leg to their original state, a white rainbow suddenly pierced through the sky and firmly nailed him to the ground with a pu sound. Du Shenshuan coughed out a mouthful of blood and looked down. He saw that the three-fingered fork was in between his chest and abdomen. He grabbed it with one hand and supported himself on the ground, refusing to fall. His other hand grabbed the handle of the fork and wanted to pull it out. However, after a few attempts, he was blocked by the magic treasure's waves of spiritual vigor and could not do as he wished. At this moment, the top of his head darkened. He stopped and looked up. Rong Juanzhong was slowly descending from the sky. When he was near, he waved his hand. After looking at him a few times, he waved his hand, and with a flash of light, the 100 refinements locking pillar flew over. It was hanging by the side. Du Shenshuan's eyes narrowed. So long as this magic treasure falls. He was about to die on the spot, so he stopped struggling and sneered, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Rong Jun raised his hand. The 100 refining heart-locking pillar gradually emitted a four-colored glow. There was a cold smile on Du Shenshuan's face, but there was not the slightest trace of fear on his face. Over at the Pu Lao flying carriage, Madame Zhao's face was as white as a sheet. She clutched sect leader Qiao's arm tightly and said in a trembling voice, "Husband, quick, quick save Sanur." Sect Master Qiao sighed softly and said from afar, "Sage Rong, Xianyu have won this formation. Can you let my son go?" He did not expect the other party to stop. No matter how he looked at it, his stepson was a target that the Xianyu sect had to eliminate first. As long as he died, the biggest obstacle in the other party's way would no longer exist. Who would have thought that Rong Juanzhong would actually stop his hand when he heard this? His expression seemed to be seriously considering it. He could not help but be startled. Madame Zhao could not help but feel a sense of hope. Not long after, Rong Juanzhong turned around and said, "Since Sect Master Qiao has spoken, it is not that I cannot let Du Zhen'er go. However, you have to do two things for me." Sect Master Qiao said cautiously, "Please speak." Rong Juanzhong said, "First place? I, Xianyu, will win the next round. As for second place..." He turned his head and looked at an altar that was shrouded in mist. He raised his voice and said, "Fellow Taoist Hui Xian, you are not one of Zhongtai's people. Why do you have to work so hard for Zhongtai?" There was no sound coming from the altar. Rong Juanzhong did not take it seriously and continued to say, "I know that you have received a favor from Zhongtai in the past. If you are willing to no longer interfere in the matter between our two sects, I can let Shenren Du go and repay this favor for you. What do you think?" At this moment, Elder Envoy Chunyuji said, "Sect Master, if Zhongtai agrees to let Du Shenshuan go, wouldn't that be releasing a tiger back into the mountains?" Yang Shuyong said, "Sage Rong knows what he is doing. If he can defeat Du Xiaoye once, he can do it again. Even if he goes back, he won't be able to do anything. However, Hui Xian is not simple and is somewhat difficult to see through. It would be best if we can make him watch from the sidelines." There was no sound coming from the mist for a long time. Rong Juanzhong did not show any impatience and waited calmly. After about 5 minutes, the thick mist around the altar gradually dissipated. Patriarch Fa Hui Xian's figure appeared from within. He looked indifferent on the surface, but he was secretly delighted. The other party's suggestion was exactly what he wanted. Only when Zhongtai was forced to the end of the line could the Python tribe take advantage of the situation. But at this moment he made a difficult expression and looked at Sect Master Qiao. He said, "What does fellow Taoist think?" Madame Zhao begged, "Husband." Sect Master Qiao closed his eyes and thought for a while. He sighed and said, "It is difficult for me to decide alone. I need to discuss with the elders." He found a disciple and said, "Go to Elder Yen and ask him what he thinks." The disciple hurriedly flew up and rushed to the altar where the elders were. Just as he was about to speak, Elder Yen beat him to it and said, "Go back and tell the sect leader that these two requests can be approved." The disciple was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed and went back to report. Elder Lin was very surprised and said anxiously, "Senior brother, Du Xiaoya always goes against us. What's the use of saving him?" Elder Yen scolded coldly, "Fool, do you know what time it is now? When the nest is overturned, how can there be intact eggs? If Du Xiaoya dies, we won't have a good ending either." In reality, what he wanted the most was to see both Rong and Du Xiaoya suffer. But if Du Shixuan was killed just like that, how could Zhongtai find a second person to go against Shen Yu? Moreover, Shen Yu's actions had already involved the battle between the two orthodoxies. This was something he could not tolerate. Compared to this, everything else could be thrown aside. Elder Lin was not convinced and said, "Senior brother, that Taoist Hui Xian might be able to fight with Rong Juanzhong. Why do you think so highly of that Du Xiaoya?" Elder Bai sighed, "Junior brother Lin, that Daoren Hui Xian is just an outsider. He looks to be on good terms with us. Actually, he appears to be united on the surface, but he is divided at heart. We can't expect him to go all out for my Zhongtai. Moreover, Du Shixuan is a strength path cultivator. As long as he can be saved and recuperated, he might be able to fight with Rong Juanzhong again in the future." After Sect Master Qiao received the reply, he did not know whether he was sad or happy. He bowed towards the distance and said, "Taoist Hui Xian, I have troubled you this time." Hearing this, the Hui Xian ancestor already knew his choice. His heart was set. He said to Rong Juanzhong, "Zhenren Rong, please let him go." Rong Juanzhong did not go back on his words. He waved his sleeves and kept the 3-fingered fork and the 100 refining heart-locking pillar. He threw a sentence. "Your sect can come and pick him up." He then turned and returned to Shen Yu. Without waiting for orders, several disciples immediately went down the mountain. It didn't take long. After a short while, they brought Du Shixuan back. He was already unconscious. Looking at his terrible condition, Madame Zhao panicked and asked, "How is my son? How is my son?" Sect Master Qiao was still calm. He went forward to check and frowned. Madame Zhao could not help but become nervous and said with a trembling voice, "Husband, do not scare me. Did Rong Juanzhong do something?" Sect Master Qiao shook his head. "Madam, do not worry. Sung has only used up too much mana and essence. It is not a big problem. I am afraid that he will not be able to fight for a while." Madame Zhao could not help but feel relieved. But thinking that without Elder Hui Xian and her own son could not fight, it could be said that the chances of winning this battle were slim. Sect Master Qiao found 2 disciples and ordered them to send Du Shixuan to settle down. Then, without saying a word, he returned to the carriage and sat there silently, as if thinking of a solution. Madame Zhao saw that his brows were shrouded with a layer of worry. She bit her lower lip and hesitated if she should tell him about the Python tribe. This tribe was based in the North Sea and there was a grotto heaven almighty in the sect. If they could get their help, it would not be difficult to deal with Shen Yu. After a few moments of hesitation, just as she was about to speak, Sect Master Qiao suddenly said, "Someone, invite fellow Taoists over." Immediately, a child beside him answered and left. After a short while, a good-looking Taoist came to the carriage and bowed. "Tseng Tsongluan greets Sect Master Qiao." Sect Master Qiao nodded. Now that Zhongtai was in danger, he did not need to be polite and said bluntly, "I invited fellow Taoist here because I want to use the stargazing book to divine where is the way out of this battle." Tseng Tsongluan was already prepared and said, "I will naturally obey, it is just that." Sect Master Qiao knew what he was worried about. Without waiting for him to finish, Sect Master Qiao said, "I can swear right now that fellow Taoist Tseng has opened the stargazing book. In the future, if there is a disaster, Zhongtai will use all the power of the sect to protect you. If I violate this oath, I will be destroyed by heaven and earth." With this promise, Tseng Tsongluan was slightly relieved. He cupped his hands and said, "Sect Master Qiao, please dismiss your attendants." Sect Master Qiao waved his hand and everyone, including Madame Zhao, retreated. Then he cast a spell and set up a restriction on the carriage, protecting the 2 of them inside. After everything was in place, he said, "Fellow Taoist, you can start the spell now." Sun Tsongwen apologized and took a few steps back. He took out an exquisite bamboo scroll from his sleeve, untied the belt, and slowly opened it. When the bamboo slip was completely exposed, suddenly a white light soared up 3 feet high, with thousands of talismans appearing on it. The talismans revolved in the air, as fast as flying stars. Streaks of dazzling light shot out like sharp arrows. He endured the intense pain and read for a few breaths. Then, he felt the blood in his body flowing in reverse, his vision darkened, and his breathing became rapid. The longer he read this stargazing book, the greater the disaster he would face in the future. However, what happened just now was of great importance, so he did not dare to put it away immediately. He forced himself to read for a long time. Suddenly, he cried out and fell on his back. Sect Master Qiao was shocked. He got down from the carriage and helped him up. Sun Tsongwen regained his composure. While his mind was still clear, he grabbed Sect Master Qiao's arm and said weakly, "Sect Master Qiao, I received a comment that can help Zhongtai get out of trouble." Sect Master Qiao's expression also tensed up. He asked, "What is it?" Sun Tsongwen took a breath and said, "The comment is put in a desperate situation and you will be reborn." Sect Master Qiao pondered for a while and wanted to ask more. However, after Sun Tsongwen said the comment, he relaxed and fell into a deep sleep. Sect Master Qiao frowned deeply. Put in a desperate situation and you will be reborn? He could not help but look into the distance. Rong Juanzhong had won all 3 battles. Xian Yu had occupied 3 more peaks and was setting up a restriction there. Zhang Yan's previous advantage of turning the tables had been lost. Xian Yu had actually sealed the way out. This place was already a dead end. Chapter 695. Rong Jun returned to the Xian Yu array. Chief Yang Shuyong welcomed him and laughed. Sage Rong has won 3 rounds in a row. Our Xian Yu array is a success. Rong Jun clasped his hands together and said, "Sect leader Jinren, only when the restrictive spell is set up can it be considered foolproof." Yang Shuyong nodded and said, "You're right. I've already made arrangements. In another hour, everything will be settled. The 2 sects will be united as one, and Master Rong will take the lead." Chun Yuji came up at this time and said, "Sect leader, do you want to send someone to challenge again?" Rong Junzhong looked over and said, "There is no need for that. Let's just follow the previous plan." Chun Yuji stood motionless, only looking at Yang Shuyong. Yang Shuyong scolded, "Aren't you going to follow Jinren Rong's instruction?" Chun Yuji said yes, bowed, and strode away. Yang Shuyong chuckled and said, "I'm here to watch a good show." On the flying carriage of Pu Lao, sect leader Qiao could not understand the message no matter how hard he thought about it. However, this matter was not something he could decide on his own, so he ordered someone to invite a few elders over to discuss it together. However, after pondering for a long time, the 2 of them still couldn't find a clue. Elder Qin muttered softly, "Putting oneself in a hopeless situation to survive, but where is the path to survival?" He took a few steps outside and looked at the mountain range in the distance. He muttered to himself, "Could it be that the way out is outside and not inside?" When Madame Zhao heard this, her heart trembled. She immediately thought of the Python tribe and said, "Could it be that this is heaven's will, that the Python tribe should help me?" At this moment, a rainbow light suddenly shot over from where Xian Yu was. All 3 of them, including sect leader Qiao, felt their hearts sink. Now that Xian Yu had sent someone over, it seemed like he was going to fight again. If it was someone else, it would be fine, but if Rong Juanzhong came again, should they send someone to stop him? Elder Lin said with a lack of confidence, "Even if Rong Juanzhong comes again, what are we afraid of? At worst, we'll just swarm him together. Do you think he can beat us all together?" Elder Yen shook his head and said, "If several people attack together, that Xian Yu definitely wouldn't sit by and watch. It would just be a chaotic battle. I, Zhongtai, also don't have much of a chance." Elder Bai sighed, "Senior brother is right. Now, even if I want to go all out, I can't. If those cultivators from outside the sect see that my Zhongtai sect is declining, how many of them will really put in effort? If it wasn't limited to the contract, The Dharma assembly had yet to end. No one is allowed to leave without permission. I'm afraid they've already run away. As he spoke, the Xianyue mountain cultivator had already arrived. Unexpectedly. He did not come here to ask for a fight. Instead, he said loudly, "Sect leader Qiao, elders Zhong Tai, the sect leader ordered me to come here to ask a question. Jinren Du has been defeated. Is Zhong Tai willing to admit defeat in this fight?" Without waiting for a reply, he turned around and said to the cultivators on the two altars on both sides, "Fellow Taoists, I, Xian Yu, will seal the exit of the Sleeping Star Mountain tomorrow. I have no enmity with you. If you want to leave, you can leave quickly tonight. Don't make a mistake." Hearing this, the cultivators outside the sect were in an uproar. If they were facing someone head-on, they would still have some confidence. However, if there was a restriction array set up around them, they would be trapped here. They only came for benefits. How would they be willing to fall into a hopeless situation with Zhong Tai? At this moment, a chime was heard. Everyone looked over in shock and saw Hui Xian Grand Master riding a cloud to the bottom of the flying carriage. He bowed and said, "Taoist brother Qiao, since Daoren has already said that he won't interfere with the matter between the two sects, it's not convenient for me to stay here for long. I'll take my leave now." Sect leader Qiao was helpless. He knew that he had the intention to leave and he could not stop him. He sighed and returned the greeting, "Fellow Taoist, please leave. I won't send you off." Elder Yen snorted coldly. Hui Xian Grand Master pretended not to hear it. He glanced at Madame Zhao vaguely before waving his sleeves and leaving with the children and disciples. When Yang Shuyong saw this, he was overjoyed. Good. Hui Xian's departure will completely shake people's hearts. Everyone can see that Zhong Tai's power is gone. Sage Rong really has a good plan. Rong Juanzhong smiled faintly and said, "Although many of the cultivators that Zhong Tai invited are dead or injured, there are still over 10 people left. Among them, there is no lack of Yuanying second-grade cultivators like Priest Zhang. If you say that these people are willing to serve Zhong Tai, I don't believe it. Now that we have opened up a path, if things go smoothly, we can get rid of half of them without any bloodshed. If Zhong Tai doesn't stop them, they will make a ruckus without us going forward." Just as he expected, after Hui Xian left, all the cultivators felt that it was impossible for Zhong Tai to defeat Xian Yu, and the rewards could only be obtained by killing the Xian Yu sect's elders, but where would such an opportunity come from? It was already good enough that they did not get implicated by Zhong Tai. They were all thinking of how to get out of this muddy pit as soon as possible. However, with the restriction of the spell contract, they could not leave at will. After a discussion, they decided to send one person to negotiate with sect leader Qiao so that they could leave. Someone suggested that Sage Zhang is a Yuanying second-grade cultivator. His cultivation is the highest here. Why don't we ask him to come forward? As soon as this was said, everyone agreed. Not to mention Zhang Yan's cultivation, just now, when he killed Elder Jin Ling, it did not take him much effort. It was clear that he was very strong in fights of magical powers. It was suitable for him to take the lead now. The person who spoke first said again, "I wonder which Taoist friend is acquainted with Sage Zhang? Ask him to come forward." At this moment, a junior female disciple muttered, "Isn't this treachery?" Hearing this, everyone looked at her with unfriendly eyes. The female disciple was so scared that she shrunk her body. Beside her, a voluptuous woman shook her head and stood out, saying, "I have met Sage Zhang once before. I am willing to go and talk to him." When everyone heard that this woman was acquainted with Zhang Yan, their expressions softened and they all said, "We'll be counting on you, fellow Taoist." The female cultivator said a few polite words and used her escape art to fly toward Zhang Yan's spell altar. When she arrived at the boundary, she landed on the ground and greeted him with a sweet smile. "Fellow Taoist Zhang, do you still remember me after we parted at the Divine House Mountain?" Zhang Yan looked at her and immediately recognized her. When he went to open the earthly fire heavenly cauldron, he passed by this woman's cave abode and had a few words with her. He said, "So it's Lady Che. You also came to the spell assembly. Why didn't I see you when you signed the contract?" Lady Che smiled embarrassedly and said, Sage Zhang also knows that I come from the heretical school. I have many enemies outside, so I changed my appearance to avoid a lot of trouble. Zhang Yan nodded and asked, Lady Che, what brings you here today? Lady Che hesitated for a moment before telling him what everyone wanted. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Please forgive me, I can't agree to this. He didn't agree, but Xing Fuliu, who was standing beside him, did. He joined Du Shixuan because he had offended Elder Lin. Du Shixuan's fate was unknown. Although he didn't want to part with the items on the list, he didn't want to stay here any longer, so he said, Fellow Taoist Che, I am willing to speak for you. What do you think? Lady Che thought for a moment. Apart from Zhang Yan, he was also the only one who won a round. He was also the only person who had won a round, so he was barely suitable. He said, Taoist Xing is willing to step up. That is exactly what I want, but I can't make the decision alone. Why don't you come with me and discuss it with the other Taoists? Xing Fuliu said impatiently, Then what are you waiting for? Let's go. Lady Che bowed to Zhang Yan, and under Xing Fuliu's urging, she hurriedly took her leave. Xing Fuliu first went to the cultivators. Seeing that he recommended himself and was indeed capable, they agreed to let him lead the way. He hurried back to where Pu Lao's flying carriage was. Unexpectedly, sect leader Qiao was not angry, but said with a calm expression, Since you all have the intention to leave, I, Zhong Tai, will not force you to leave. Xing Fuliu was overjoyed. Afraid that Sect Master Qiao would change his mind, he immediately said, Sect Master, please give us your seal and remove the contract. Sect Master Qiao looked at Elder Yan. The latter expressionlessly took out the contract from his sleeve and said, Take it. You can do whatever you want with it. Xing Fu Lu snatched it and used his true power to turn it into dust. Then, without saying goodbye, he stomped his feet and flew down from the altar. He was secretly delighted. Now that I've done this, I've received a huge favor. Where else can I find such a good deal? When he passed by the altar he came from just now, he saw that Zhang Yan was still there. He sneered and thought, If you want to stay here and die with Zhong Tai, it's up to you. I won't be accompanying you. After Xing Fuliu left, Elder Lin grumbled, Senior Marshal Brother, why did you let those people go? How can I, Zhong Tai, fight against Shen Yu? Elder Yan sighed, Junior Marshal Brother, Shen Yu is using a psychological tactic. If he doesn't succeed, he will be bound by the contract. Although he won't turn hostile immediately, he might bite back when Shen Yu comes to attack. It's better to let him go. Elder Lin was stunned for a long time. Then he sat down dejectedly. At this moment, streaks of light flew up from the spell altars on both sides, heading towards the other side. Elder Yan looked at the people leaving and said calmly, Sect Master, now that these people are gone, Shen Yu will definitely come to attack tomorrow. Sect Master Qiao sighed, I understand what Elder Yan said, but I am not willing to admit defeat. Elder Yan nodded. Not to mention the others, they were the Sect Master and the Great Elder. No matter what, they were people that Shen Yu must eliminate. Therefore, they had no way out and had to fight to the death. Madame Zhao could not help but say, No, there is another way that can help Zhong Tai get through this. Sect Master Qiao was not surprised at all. He said lightly, Madam, are you talking about the Python tribe? Madame Zhao raised her head in disbelief and asked with a trembling voice, Husband, you know about it? Sect Master Qiao said in a low voice, Even if I don't know about the demon cultivators coming to Hope Sound Mountain, how can I hide it from spiritual Master Zheng? Madame Zhao looked at him in shock and asked softly, Then what do you think? Sect Master Qiao waved his hand and said resolutely, There is no need to talk about this anymore. Back then, the 5 sects agreed not to let the Python tribe enter Dongsheng without permission. If we do this, even if we can get through this, the 3 sects of the south will have an excuse to come and punish us. We cannot do this. Even if he lost this battle and lost his life, he still had his people and disciples. At most, he could hide in the south and there would be a chance for him to be reborn. However, if the Python tribe entered Dongsheng, the 3 sects of the south would find an excuse to attack them. Then, there would be no place for them in Dongsheng continent. Madame Zhao lowered her eyes and did not speak anymore. Elder Yen listened and nodded. He thought, Sect Master is right. How can we be on the same side as the cold-blooded worms? He looked down and was surprised. Why is there another Taoist who has not left? Everyone looked over and saw a handsome Taoist. Not only did he not leave, but he was also flying towards them. After a while, he landed on the altar. Sect Master Chiao could not help but stand up. He was surprised and said, "So it is Spiritual Master Zhang. Why are you not leaving?" Zhang Yan looked around, cupped his fist and said, "I'm here to lend you a hand." Sect Master Chiao was excited. Everyone left Zhong Tai, but Zhang Yan was the only one who was willing to stay. He sighed and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are so righteous. How should I thank you?" Chapter 696. Zhang Yan didn't mince words about his purpose of coming, but Sect Master Chiao didn't think so. Under Xian Yu's series of attacks, Zhongtai sect was already at the end of its rope. Even if there was another person, it wouldn't help the overall situation. If he stood on this side, it would be a narrow escape from death. Sect Master Chiao clasped his hands and bowed to Zhang Yan solemnly. He then turned his body and said, "Fellow Taoist, please get on the carriage and have a chat." Zhang Yan returned the bow with a smile and walked into the carriage. Madame Zhao forced a smile at him while Elder Yen was resting with his eyes closed. When he saw him coming up, he nodded as a greeting. After Sect Master Chiao invited Zhang Yan to take a seat, he also sat down and turned to Elder Yen and Daoren, "Senior brother, please invite all the junior brothers here. I have something to say." Elder Yen was stunned. In these 100 years, this was the first time Sect Master Chiao called him senior brother. He couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. He slowly stood up and bowed respectfully, "I'll go make the arrangements now." He went out to make the arrangements, and not long after, he saw 10 rays of light flying over. These people were the sect's disciples and the various immortal cities' castellans. It could be said that Zhongtai sect was bound together for good or bad. Sect Master Chiao looked over. The elites of the sect were all here. After the battle tomorrow, he didn't know how many of them would survive. He sighed deeply and cupped his hands. "Junior brothers, I'm useless and have implicated all of you." Elder Yen sighed. "Junior brother, what are you saying? Ever since you became the sect master, you've never slacked off. Every day, you've put in so much effort to strengthen the sect. If it wasn't for so many mundane matters, based on junior brother's aptitude, I'm afraid you'd have stepped into the 3rd stage realm long ago. Speaking of which, it's all my fault that I'm here today. It's too late to regret." Sect Master Chiao shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Since Xian Yu sealed the mountain and set up the formation, I am not willing to sit and wait for death. I also want to set up a restriction in this mountain so that I can compete with Xian Yu tomorrow." After Xing Fuliu, Chen Yangzi, and the other cultivators left the altar, they flew all the way out of Sleeping Star Mountain. However, when they arrived at a ravine that was sandwiched between 2 mountains, a barrier of strong clouds appeared in front of them. It was thick and heavy, and they were unable to pass through it. When everyone saw that they were about to leave the mountain, they couldn't help but be shocked and angry. Someone shouted, "Didn't you, Xian Yu, say that you would let us go? Are you going to go back on your words?" Xing Fuliu was also panicking. He was different from the others. He had killed Xian Yu before. Although that person wasn't a disciple of Xian Yu, he might come back for revenge. Xing Fuliu also shouted, "Fellow Taoists, if Xian Yu goes back on his words, we can just go back." At this moment, a rainbow flew out from the sky. It was Xian Yu's summoning elder, Chunyu Ji, who used an escape art to come out. He cupped his hands at the crowd and said, "Fellow Taoists, don't panic. I, Xian Yu, should let you go, but I'm afraid that there are people from Zhongtai among you. If they go out and call for reinforcements, I'm afraid it will be disadvantageous to us. Thus, I ask everyone to stay here for now. After tomorrow's battle, you can leave on your own." Everyone was still dissatisfied. They had an agreement earlier, but now there was this, and they felt like they were being played. Many of them immediately thought of going back. Chunyu Ji continued, If everyone is interested, you can also come to my Xianyu. Tomorrow we will attack Zhongtai together. Those who contribute will be rewarded, but if you are not willing, that's fine too. You can stay here for now. You can't even wait for one night, right? Xing Fuliu's heart moved and he stood out from the crowd. He cupped his hands and said, Emissary Chunyu, if what you said is true, I am willing to be the vanguard. Chunyu Ji glanced at him and smiled. Fellow Taoist Xing is not mediocre. Come, bestow a spirit crane cloak. At this moment, a slender servant girl flew down from the peak. Her soft jade hand held a wooden tray with a white feather cloak on it. Chunyu Ji knew that this was a treasure, so he didn't hesitate and happily accepted it. He shook the cloak open and draped it over his body. Seeing that there were benefits to be gained, everyone was moved. They all expressed their willingness to work for Xianyu. Chunyu Ji saw that things were going smoothly, and he couldn't help but smile. He took care of the disciples beside him and said, Take the spell deeds down and let them sign them. The cultivators took the spell deeds and saw that it was almost the same as Zhongtai's, but the name was changed to Xianyu's. At this moment, they didn't have any thoughts of resistance. They forced out their essence blood and signed the spell deeds. In just a moment, the cultivators that originally belonged to Zhongtai's side had turned to Xianyu's side. Yang Shuyong looked at this scene and said happily, Spiritual Master Rong's plan is brilliant. I, Xianyu, will have 10 more helpers without any effort. Rong Juanzhong pointed down a few times and said with a faint smile, After today's battle, Xianyu have already won against Zhongtai by more than one level. Now that I have the help of these people, when tomorrow comes, I can openly suppress them. If Zhongtai doesn't comply, under the general situation, I can turn him into dust. Yang Shuyong couldn't stop laughing. Chunyu Ji was also rueful. Rong Juanzhong grasped the cultivator's thoughts of seeking benefits and avoiding harm. He first split Zhongtai, then took the chance to gather people over. This method was not bad. Gathering dozens of cultivators tomorrow to suppress them, he knew that if it was him, he probably wouldn't have any thoughts of resistance. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and asked curiously, Why don't I see that priest Zhang among those people? Rong Juanzhong glanced at him and said, This is not strange. Since he knows that Shun Baishuang and I, Xianyu, have enmity, why would he walk into the trap? Since he is willing to be buried with Zhongtai, then we can deal with him together tomorrow. Elder Hui Xian walked out of Sleeping Star Mountain, and Chu Changji was already waiting outside. He came up and said, Master, disciple has been guarding here, and there is nothing strange. Elder Hui Xian nodded his head. He was a cautious person, and to guard against Xianyu cult, he didn't do anything outside the mountain. Before entering the mountain, he placed Chu Changji outside to receive him. He said, Is the matter that I ordered you to do done properly? Chu Changji hurriedly said, Disciple has already opened up a cave abode 30 miles away. The terrain is hidden, and if one didn't search intentionally, one wouldn't be able to find it. Elder Hui Xian praised, Not bad. After this matter, there is no need to hide outside, you can even come back to the cave abode to cultivate. Chu Changji was extremely excited. Elder Hui Xian said that he would be expelled from the sect, and this was not a lie. He also understood that this was because of the important matter, and now that he was willing to be taken back into the sect, there was no need to wander outside anymore. He immediately knelt down and cried, Disciple thanks Master for your great kindness. Elder Hui Xian nodded his head and said, Lead the way. Chu Changji hurriedly got up and said, Master, follow disciple. Both of them flew together, and after a short distance, they arrived at the cave abode that Chu Changji mentioned. This place was located in a sunken part of the mountain wall, and the outside was overgrown with weeds and trees, making it hard for passers-by to notice. Elder Hui Xian took a look and was also satisfied. He entered the inner room and took a glance to confirm that there was no outsider before shaking his sleeve, and a cloud of white smoke came out. When it was piled up to a person's height, it suddenly dispersed, and Luo Dongchuan's figure was revealed. Elder Hui Xian said, Fellow Taoist Luo, Zhongtai has been forced into a desperate situation, and we will know tonight whether he succeeds or not. Luo Dongchuan took out a jade token, and after a brief inspection he said, "There is no talisman message. I think Xiao Huanjuan has not made up her mind, but it is not urgent. This time when I came out, Elder Ancestor gave me a talisman, and it has the ability to pass through formations and restrictions. When Xian Yu makes his move tomorrow, my aunt will also be inside to help, and we can save Zhong Tai and the rest." Chu Changji was slightly puzzled and said, "Elder Luo, if Zhong Tai is not willing to join hands with us, wouldn't this be a waste of effort?" Luo Dongchuan chuckled and said, "If we do this, what do you think the 3 southern sects will think?" Chu Changji thought for a moment and said, "They will definitely say that Zhong Tai is colluding with the Python tribe." At this point, he suddenly paused, and a strange expression appeared on his face, as if he understood something. Luo Dongchuan laughed and said, "That's right, ever since the 2 sects fought, the 3 southern sects have the intention to dip their hands into the north, but they still lack an excuse. Since there is no excuse, then I will give them one, and by then, it will be the same, and I am not afraid that Xiao Huanjuan will not give in." Chu Changji did not expect to actually use such a method, and after careful consideration, as long as this matter is done, Zhong Tai can be said to be unable to defend himself, and this plan to drag people into the water may seem like a scoundrel, but it is very effective. He also did not know how to evaluate, and could only sigh, and said, "Extraordinary people use extraordinary methods." Elder Hui Xian said, "Since this is the case, I think there is no need for us to be master and disciple tomorrow. I will part ways with fellow Taoist here." But Luo Dongchuan stopped him and said, "There is no need to rush. No matter what, Zhong Tai is our tribe's future ally, and it is not good for his power to be weakened too much. After rescuing him tomorrow, if he is chased by Xian Yu, I will still need fellow Taoists to come out and stop him, and save as many as you can." How could Elder Hui Xian not know that this was to prevent him from staying out of the matter? But as long as he got what he wanted, the rest were small matters, and said with an indifferent expression, "So be it." The night passed quickly. At dawn the next day, Xian Yu sent another disciple out, and when he arrived under the Pusho flying carriage, he bowed and said, "Sect Master Qiao, Sect Master Yang sent this disciple to ask if Zhong Tai is willing to admit defeat. As long as Sect Master Qiao and Elder Yen are willing to surrender, I, Xian Yu, will not pursue the matter." Elder Bai saw that Xian Yu did not forget to use psychological tactics even at this moment, and he was annoyed, and snorted coldly, causing the disciple's body to sway, his face pale, and he almost fell down. Elder Yen said in a low voice, "Shitty, this person is only a junior to pass on a message. There is no need to make things difficult for him, and don't let others look down on him." Sect Master Qiao said in a low voice, "Go back and tell Yang Shuyong that the orthodoxy passed down by Grandmaster Jinzhong cannot be given away so easily. If he wants to take my Xiao Huanjuan's head, he can, but it will depend on how many Xian Yu disciples are willing to pay with their lives." That disciple just now suffered a loss, and did not dare to say more, and after a bow, he turned and left. Not long after, he returned to the top of the mountain, and repeated Sect Master Qiao's words without missing a word. Yang Shuyong had long expected this, and with a sneer, he turned back and asked, "Have the restrictions been set up?" Chunyu Ji bowed respectfully and said, "Everything is in place. All the peaks are guarded by our sect's disciples, and there are no restrictions, so no one can enter or leave." Yang Shuyong raised his hand, and there was a loud noise from the top of the mountain. Behind him, dozens of flying lights flew out at the same time, and the multicolored lights flashed, surged, and shot out green light. From the looks of it, there were more than 100 of them. Many Yuanian cultivators gathered together, and the heaven and earth were filled with astral winds. Xian Qi filled the air, and the clouds were dazzling. With endless power, they pressed down with the power to split the clouds and overturn the seas. Compared to this, the dozen people on the platform were like a small boat in a big wave, and could capsize at any time. Sect Master Qiao saw that among them were the people who had just left yesterday, and he could not help but be shocked and angry. With a crack, he broke the rui in his hand, and his eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the sky, and he laughed bitterly, "Good, good, 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 good." Madame Zhao stood with him in silence. Elder Yen let out a long sigh and said, "Shitty, quickly activate the restrictive formation." He also did not know how long the restrictive formation could last under such heavy pressure, so he could only do his best and leave it to fate. Zhang Yen looked forward and suddenly smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, a clear light appeared, and in an instant he was in the sky. When Sect Master Qiao saw this, he said anxiously, "Fellow Zhang, what are you doing? Quickly return to the formation." Zhang Yen, however, did not pay any attention to him. His expression was calm, and he faced the surging astral winds and clouds with his hands behind his back, and his sleeves fluttered under the wind. At this moment, the 7 cultivators at the front were already within a mile of him. Seeing that he was alone in front of them, they all sneered, looked at each other, and increased their speed. As long as they were close enough, they could take out their treasures together, and they would be able to easily kill him. However, when they were only 1,000 feet away, they felt their bodies stop abruptly, and they could not move at all. It was as if they were restrained in midair by an invisible supernatural power, and they immediately panicked. Someone shouted, "Oh no, it's the heaven and earth seal." Rong Juanzhong had been watching the battle from behind, and one of the 7 people happened to be Xian Yu's disciple. His eyes flashed, and he was about to fly over to help. However, when he was halfway there, he suddenly saw a ray of sword light that was like a rainbow, and it was actually coming at him from thousands of feet away. His heart shuddered. A normal sword light that could travel more than 1,000 feet was already amazing, let alone thousands of feet. Seeing that the sword light was coming at him so quickly, like a shooting star, he let out a low grunt and gathered his supernatural power, casting the 30,000 kilograms divine art. The sword orb flew over quickly, and when it was within 1,000 feet of him, its momentum paused and it was stopped. Then the sword orb suddenly shook, and out of nowhere, a ray of sword light actually rushed over to him. He was instantly taken aback, and he hurriedly used the technique to stop it again. However, before he could relax, the sword light actually shot out again, and another ray of sword light shot out. It was still charging towards him, and he had no choice but to use the technique again. That sword light was repeatedly stopped more than 10 times, and it looked like a string of stars in midair. However, no matter how the divine art stopped it, the sword light still continued to split, and it seemed to have no end. The last ray actually broke into the area within 100 feet of him. Seeing that the ray of cold light tore through the atmosphere, and the cold flames that shot out almost reached his eyebrows, Rong Juanzhong's expression changed drastically, and he could no longer maintain his composure. He hurriedly lowered his head, and he only felt a chill on his head. A part of his hair bun had already been cut off, and his hair was loose. This time, he was also extremely shocked, and he did not dare to be arrogant, and he fell back in a sorry state. Chapter 697. With a wave of his sleeves, Zhang Yen killed 7 Yuanian cultivators in a row. Everyone was shocked. The cultivators were originally charging forward, but they suddenly froze. It was as if a surging wave had crashed onto a reef, turning them into powder. Unspecified currency literature bar. Waxba unspecified currency, especially when they saw Rong Juanzhong being forced back by one sword, their morale was shaken. Dozens of cultivators faced him alone, but none of them dared to step forward. Seeing this, everyone on the flying carriage was speechless. They were in a daze and couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. After a while, Sect Master Qiao suddenly thought of that comment. He pondered for a moment and finally came to his senses. He slapped the railing and said excitedly, "Put yourself in a dead end and you will be reborn. Put yourself in a dead end and you will be reborn. I see. The heavens haven't forsaken my Zhongtai. I've actually received help from a noble." Madame Zhao was also surprised, but there was still some worry in her heart that she couldn't get rid of. She asked, "Can Zhenren Zhang block it?" After she said that, she felt her hand tighten. She turned around and saw that it was Sect Master Qiao who was squeezing her hand. She could feel waves of trembling, but she couldn't tell if it was excitement or bewilderment. Her gaze was still fixed in front of her as she muttered, Definitely. Rong Juanzhong was forced back by Zhang Yan's sword light. After he returned, his face was very gloomy. Everyone looked at his expression and understood that no one dared to come closer. After he mastered the 30,000 kilograms divine art, he was confident that no sharp weapon could get close to him, so he rarely took out his talisman to protect himself. Just now, when he saw the sword light coming from thousands of feet away, he couldn't help but be careless. He was caught off guard and suffered a huge loss. Even though he wasn't injured, he lost all his face. Yang Shuyong walked over and took a few glances at him. He asked, "Zhenren Rong, are you injured?" Rong Juanzhong tried his best to calm down and quickly tied up his hair. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for asking, Sect Master. I'm fine. Just now I was careless and almost got hit by this person's flying sword." As he said that, he cast his gaze forward again. Now that he saw Zhang Yan as his greatest enemy, he didn't want to fight him again before he figured out his opponent's background. At that moment, Zhang Yan's mind moved. The sword pellet flew back. It circled around his body in an extremely agile manner. As the sword light flew, it was sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes swift, sometimes sluggish. It seemed to contain some sort of mysterious rhythm as it flashed and leaped without leaving a trace. It was hard to tell. His gaze swept across the crowd. He said in a clear voice, "Fellow Taoists of Xianyu, if you are willing to retreat, I will not allow you to leave. I will not push myself too far, but if I go one step nearer, I will die. Don't blame I for being merciless." His voice rumbled and echoed throughout the mountains. This was his verbal warning. The matter this time was related to the Dharmakaya spirit medicine he used to cultivate, so he had to help Zhong Tai. If Xianyu was willing to let him go, then what happened to Zhong Tai in the future had nothing to do with him, and he wouldn't interfere. But if Xianyu persisted in his opinion and insisted on annihilating Zhong Tai here, then he could only raise his sword and retreat. With these words, there were indeed a few people who had thoughts of retreating. Most of these people were at the first stage of the cultivation realm. In the face of a spell like the Heaven and Earth Lock, they were completely unable to resist. No matter how one looked at it, they would definitely die if they rushed forward. A Xianyu cultivator saw that the situation wasn't right and immediately shouted, "Everyone, don't forget that you all signed the contract. Aren't you afraid of the oath if you retreat in the face of battle?" With this reminder, everyone couldn't help but be wary, but no one went forward. Just now, they all saw what happened to the 7 people. That Xianyu cultivator said again, "Everyone, don't be afraid of this person. He is just one person. Let's surround him and use our treasures to fight." Everyone instantly understood that they weren't just one person, so why did they have to fight head-on? Without any hesitation, they spread out in all directions. They no longer rushed forward as fiercely as before. Instead, they slowly advanced and flanked from 3 sides. There were even some who flew above and hovered high up in the air, intending to launch a sneak attack from above. Zhang Yan stood still with his hands behind his back. His gaze was deep and there seemed to be a cold glint brewing in it. Feeling the killing intent in his heart, the sword pellet buzzed and jumped out, spitting out rays of sharp light. Elder Bai was overwhelmed with emotions as he watched from below. He said loudly, "How can I let Taoist Zhang fight alone for my Zhongtai's matter?" With that said, he was about to jump forward. However, he felt something tighten on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Elder Yen pressing him down. He asked anxiously, "Senior, why are you stopping me?" Elder Yen Daoren said, "Junior, don't be anxious. Look at that sword pellet. If I'm not wrong, this Taoist Yang is a sword cultivator. Such a person can cross the rainbow and pierce through the clouds. He's never afraid of group battles. If you go up, not only will you not be able to help him, you will also become a burden." This, Elder Bai was at a loss. He had also cultivated to the 2nd stage of the Yuaning realm, so when did he become so useless? However, when he thought about how Zhong Tai had relied on an outsider cultivator to save the situation, he felt a wave of dejection in his heart. The cultivators on the field had already surrounded Zhang Yan. Seeing that the time was right, the Xian Yu disciple shouted, "Do it!" and threw his treasure down. With this person taking the lead, everyone else also made their move. Dozens of treasures fell down, and for a moment, rays of light filled the entire area. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. He took a step forward and suddenly he heard the sound of surging waves. It was as if the valley was suddenly flooded. A boundless light of water rose up from under his feet and spiraled around his body. All the treasures that flew over fell into it without a sound and disappeared. The cultivators who attacked immediately discovered that the connection between their treasures and their minds was instantly severed. They were all shocked, but no matter how much they shouted, they couldn't summon it back. At this time, they saw that in the middle of the waves, a fiery red cloud slowly overflowed, followed by a slight rustling sound. In just a short moment, a droning sound resounded, and it was clamorous like needles were pricking it. Everyone was distraught, and when they saw it clearly, they noticed that the red cloud was actually condensed from countless dark red and blood-red venomous worms. Many people saw that it looked fierce and knew that it was not a good thing. They didn't care about collecting their treasures and hurriedly retreated. The bloodline golden insect hadn't come out for a long time. Normally, it only relied on the spiritual energy that Zhang Yan occasionally poured into it to nourish it, so it was already starving. At this moment, when it smelled the flesh and blood of a living person, its jaws and teeth moved. With a ka-ka sound, it scattered and flew all over the sky, gnawing on whoever it saw. There were a few people who couldn't dodge in time. Their protective treasures were bitten through in just a few bites. Even if they summoned their treasures, they could only hold on for a few breaths. In the blink of an eye, a person was gnawed to the point where no flesh or bone was left. Everyone was shocked. They had never seen such fierce and ferocious evil insects before, so they immediately fell into chaos. Zhang Yan saw that his goal of disturbing everyone had been achieved. His eyes flashed. He shook his sleeves and used the sword escape technique. His body and sword became one, turning into a soaring sword light. He brazenly killed his way into the crowd. This time, it set off a reign of terror. The cultivators of the two sects only saw a sword light sweeping across the field. Brilliant neon lights flashed back and forth. Wherever the sword light went, pieces of flesh and blood scattered. The flying sword technique was originally good at fighting against many alone. With the help of the blood thread golden insects, his sword had killed 12 people in just a few moments. In less than a minute of fighting, the number of cultivators who had directly or indirectly died in his hands had already exceeded 20. No one was able to withstand his attacks. The crowd of cultivators was killed until they were panic-stricken and terrified. It was unknown who was the first to shout, but then they turned around and ran. The rest of the people didn't care about the restriction of the contract and fled in panic in all directions. Yang Shuyong was both shocked and furious as he watched everyone flee. They were just about to crush the bell platform and complete the great cause of the two sects becoming one. However, Zhang Yan had interfered midway, single-handedly slaughtering dozens of cultivators of the same generation. He couldn't vent his anger on Rong Juanzhong, so he could only shout at the protector beside him, "Mo Shi Tong, take this person and capture him. Don't say that you can't defeat him with so many people. If you can't do it, don't come back to see me." Mo Shi Tong complained in his heart, but he couldn't refuse the Supreme Headmaster's order. He could only step forward and accept the order. Rong Juanzhong's eyes flashed and he called out to him, "Protector Mo, take this treasure. It might have a miraculous effect." Mo Shi Tong looked at the 100 refinements locking pillar. Rong Juanzhong took a few steps forward and reminded him, "This treasure is strange. It is made of 4-colored gang sand. Only enlightened Master Dong Tian can take it head-on. I think Taoist Zhang's watercolored light is strange, but it may not be able to subdue this treasure. As long as we get close, we will be able to injure him severely. Let's take advantage of this moment when he is full of himself." Mo Shi Tong understood and said, "Supreme Headmaster, enlightened Master Rong, let's see what I can do." He didn't go too far from the top of the mountain. He was prepared to run back the moment something went wrong. After a few glances, he found an opportunity and threw out 3 flying knives to distract Zhang Yan. Then, a ball of spiritual light wrapped around the 100 Refinements lock pillar and hid it behind him. Then he threw it out as well. Zhang Yan suddenly heard the sound of a sword in his heart, and he was immediately alerted. He glanced around and sneered. With a wave of his sleeves, he used the 5 elements escape technique. The 3 flying daggers and the 100 Refinements locking pillar were evaded when they got close to him. Then he pointed with his finger and a bolt of lightning shot out. Mo Shirtong didn't even have time to escape before he was struck by the divine lightning. With a boom, he exploded into pieces along with his treasures. Zhang Yan rolled up his sleeves again, and the watery light behind him shook. When it disappeared, the 100 Refinements locking pillar and the flying daggers were gone. Rong Juanzhong saw all of this, and his expression was solemn. He said in a low voice, "This person's Dao techniques and supernatural powers are only at the 2nd stage of Yuanying, but I didn't expect his magical powers to be so strong. If we can't fight him head-on, we can only retreat and defend." Yang Shuyong suddenly turned his head and looked at him with a sharp gaze. With a hint of questioning in his voice, he said, "What? Retreat and defend?" Rong Juanzhong said indifferently, "Headmaster, have you forgotten that we have the protection of the formation? Our sect is already in an invincible position, so why should we risk our lives to fight him? Let's just trap him here and see what else he can do." He wasn't someone who would lose his mind after losing face. At this moment he was still calm. Although the battle was fierce and half of them were injured or dead, Xian Yu's previous arrangements were very safe. As long as Zhang Yan reached their mountain, he could use the formation to repel him. Yang Shuyong's expression changed a few times. After thinking about it, he felt that Zhang Yan was really too powerful, and he couldn't do anything to him at the moment. He could only say hatefully, "As you wish." The disciple immediately sent out the order. Not long after, clouds rose from the various mountain peaks and activated the formation. They simply guarded the door and didn't come out. Zhang Yan took a few glances and sneered, "Do you think that you can escape just like that?" As soon as the spell was cast, the high cloud above suddenly shook violently. Then, a yellow smoke slowly rose to the top of the sky and gradually condensed into a giant hand that covered the sky. The sky rumbled continuously. The people below stared blankly at the giant yellow smoke hand that almost covered the sky. They didn't know how to react. Zhang Yan waited until his mana was at its peak. Just as he was about to reach his limit, he let out a loud roar and slammed the mountain peak in front of him. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.